Welcome. Welcome everyone to Haptic Feedback, a podcast about video games and computer technology. I'm your host Joel, and with me are my co-hosts Al and Jay. Together we make up the Haptic Feedback. In this episode, we talk about recent game events, a non-event or a return to form, PlayStation and Xbox dance off, or handbags at 10 paces. Is the global economy affecting gaming? Economies of fail. AMD, Intel, Nvidia are about to enter another generation, but is it next gen? And will Joel ever stop loving Warframe? Okay, guys, so welcome to another Haptic Feedback. So, how's everybody doing? Al, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm good. Just finished up at my old place. Just starting up soon to be starting a new job. So yeah, no, I have a bit of downtime at the moment, bit of training. No, it's been good. It's been good and playing the odd different game actually. So we can probably talk about that a bit later on. So yeah, it's been good. It's been good, and learning new stuff as well. So it's been quite good. I'll move on to Jay. How have you been?
Yeah, I've been good. I just wanted to say that Al was. I've never seen him smile so much. He's underplayed how much better he's actually feeling, and he's got a bit of downtime. So I'd like to see him just play more games in the period before he starts his new job. But yeah, come back to me. Yeah, I've been really good. I have been busy in the summer holidays with kids and holidays, which is really nice. I haven't played that many games. Well, obviously, I've been following the news. I've been more on the kind of catching up with movies and TV series that I've been missing out on. But I'm good otherwise, yeah.
Oh, I guess it's my goal. It's like, yeah,
So I should
yeah, yeah,
hand it over to you. Sorry, I was just.
yeah. I've been fine, guys. Obviously, summer holidays as well, so obviously spent a bit more time with the kid. So, as you may or may not know, that's more or less a full-time job on top of my own, my regular full-time job. I haven't had a lot of time to play games, I'll be honest.
Mm.
I mean, funny that. Um, but, I'm hoping once they get back to school, yeah, kind of gaming opportunities will start opening up and that
What,
sort of thing.
during the working day when they're at school?
Well, I'm not to kind of like put myself in the spotlight. Well, probably not on the working day, but you never know.
Yeah.
But at least a good part of the evening, which is like, my evenings have been just spent recovering from my days,
Mm.
at the moment. So yeah, it's a little bit different. I mean, we've had a fantastic summer. When you're a full-time dad, that just means, on a weekend you're basically out and about a bit more than you would normally be.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, so that's really that. But yeah, I said like I'm not being able to kind of like play a lot of games. Like yourself, Jay, I've been keeping up with the press, gaming press, the technology press, seeing what's going down there, and just getting on with things really. You're coming up to the end of the year now, so like a lot of interesting things are happening or not happening. Let's put it that way. So that's really what I've been kind of like looking at. In saying that, I mean, I would say like let's move on and let's start talking about tech. Okay, guys. For the first topic, I really want to talk about recent gaming events and showcases. Obviously, we've talked at length about PlayStation and Xbox, but obviously we've got events like Gamescom. We've had the Destiny 2 showcase, and we've even have Warframe 10 And really, I want to dive into some of the news, in these areas or these showcases. And I want to ask a question: are these events now just non-events? Not interesting. Why are we wasting our time? And should we be going the way of Sony? Just give us trailers. What is it? Yeah. Do they add any value anymore? That's the question I'm really posing on some of these events. Personally, I love a good event. I think gamers deserve, if you like, real showcases, real surprises, you know, seismic announcements in festivals to celebrate what we love. But is that what we're really getting these days? Or is it merely just an extension to the marketing department, usual cycle? Not sure. Yeah. So let's roll into it. I mean, let's roll into it. So obviously, recently we've had uh, Gamescom 2020, 2022, I should say. Happened 24th of August, ended 28th of August. And I think the event this time was in person and online. And I think this is one of the events that, we'll be looking to go to when the time's right, guys. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, what I will say about it, there was a lot of games that were talked about. Yeah. Whether they're big games or not, open for, debate. What I will say, for Gamescom, the usual cringe-worthy moments happened. Yeah. And I'm not really sure what it is about that kind of event. We also had the Destiny 2 showcase for 2022, and I think that happened 23rd of August. Okay, and I think that was largely about Beyond Light, amongst other things, if I understood it.
Lightfall.
Ah,
Lightfall.
yeah, Lightfall. Is that the name of the new expansion?
It is, yeah.
Wow, interesting. Okay,
So Beyond Light was the last one.
and then we had Warframe TennoCon 2022, which was a fair bit earlier. July 16th. And I just snuck this in here because, as you know, I'm a bit of a Warframe fan. I wanted something to talk about. This was it. Outside of Gamescom, um, and what they dropped was uh, a new expansion or a new piece of DLC, I'll call it. Obviously, free, called the Divari Paradox, and a new game. They've got a new game, Soulframe. Fairly uninspiring name, but it's a new game, yeah, which looks like let's say more of a old school fantasy RPG third person game, Soulframe.
Is it on the same game engine, is it?
I'd be surprised if it wasn't. I would be
Yeah.
surprised if it wasn't.
Yeah.
But let's roll right into it now. So let's start off with Gamescom. So obviously Gamescom, um, basically well-known European event, largely kind of recognised as the E3 of Europe, if you like. Hundreds of thousands of visitors a year, but different, has a different flavour to it. Now, I pretty much focused on, opening night live with, Jeff Keighley makes his regular appearance on these events, opening up shows, yeah. So he did that event, uh, rattled off what felt like 50 plus games during the actual event. I think it was a 2 hour event, 2 hour showcase. And I thought to myself, number one, there's a lot of content. Number two, I thought to myself, not a lot of this is actually that earth shattering. And then there were one or two really bizarre moments in that showcase that I'll get into, and the usual really cringe-worthy, moments that, in my view, anyway, Gamescom is actually, very, well known for, and I'll call it out straight away. Actually, it was really the game of the show type announcements. Yeah, they would basically put in between kind of game announcements in the actual kind of showcase on opening night live, and you'd have stuff like the most anticipated Xbox game or the most anticipated PlayStation game. Yeah, and it's such throwaway kind of awards, but you'd have people kind of actually on stage getting the award. And the silliest thing about some of these awards were you'd have the most anticipated PlayStation game, but it'd be like no game that anybody's actually anticipating. It would just so happen to be at the show, yeah. And I thought, look, well, this is absolutely throwaway. I mean, please get rid of this, right? And you might have something that resembles a a credible showcase for gaming. And obviously, Jeff Keighley, did a reasonably good job in kind of like really frontlining, the show itself, doing what he usually does. I mean, did you guys actually catch the show in its entirety, or just parts of it?
For me, no. I think with a lot of these events, I typically skip. I think most news outlets will bring forward any of the really interesting stuff that I'm kind of looking forward to my attention, and yeah, generally I'll skip them and just wait for big things and trailers and stuff, and I'll kind of watch those things. So no, I it's kind of a non-event for me, really.
Yeah, I mean, I typically like to watch these things, but for this particular event, I wasn't free during that period. Um, and I'm glad I missed it, to be honest, because like you just called out, it was a bit of a non-event. I mean, it almost feels like we're feeling the effects of COVID, right? Games have been put back, um, and I actually, me and Al were talking about this. We might be entering a new realm of not having the same cycle of news with the same level of intensity every year to justify some of these shows. That's a bit of a different topic, right? So, but yeah, I didn't.
Wondering, like, based on what you're saying, really, whether some of these some of these game releases announcements were done to tie in with some of these big events. Yeah.
Yeah,
But if the big events are no longer big and they don't help with the marketing, what's the point?
Yep, yep,
I think they're almost kind of in a holding pattern. Sony and Microsoft, and what were kind of hinting that they weren't going to have many big reveals come out to this event. It will be almost like a post show of their E3. They were just going to maybe show another trailer, or maybe have some of the development team talking, and that's kind of what the trailers for the games were like. They were just a bit more of an insight of a game that you already knew, and no real bombshell news really. I mean, there's a couple of things in there around the Sony DualSense controller, which is quite interesting.
Yeah,
Um, but it was very much, as you said, like pretty much filler.
definitely. It felt absolutely like filler, with maybe, like you said, a little bit more detail on some of the things that we've seen before.
Yeah, and I think what you said at the start, I think Gamescom is the power of Gamescom is most more being in person, seeing the games, playing some of the demos, meeting the developers, seeing all the stands they produce, and that's the kind of the vibe similar to E3, right? It was more a physical event. We probably missed that in the news cycle. The news cycle was obviously then weak, right? So
Yeah. Well, let's go through what was said anyway in opening night live, and I'm going to rattle through some of these, and maybe on some of the more interesting items, I'm going to maybe we'll get into a bit more detail. What they did on Gamescom opening night live, Jeff Keighley, they opened up with this thing called Everywhere, and it's basically done, I think, helmed by an ex-GTA guy, Leslie Benzie. It's really not clear what it is. They've been developing it for 5 years, and Everywhere feels like everything. Because if you look at the if you look at the trailer, right, it's got racing. There's some, I think there was some third person action. It was strange in that they didn't really explain what it was. I'm basically thinking metaverse question mark here. Is this a opening shot into what we think would be a more expensive kind of like metaverse type offering? It's an ex GTA, like guy at the helm with this thing. I'm just wondering. And it's a strange thing to be opening a show with as well. That was the other thing.
yeah,
They moved on to what really was a cinematic of Dune Awakening, which is a survival MMO. And then obviously, Jeff Keighley announced, well, not really kind of announced, but said, "Yep, Sony's given us something to show off." So we had this DualSense Edge controller. And I thought to myself, as good as the DualSense Edge controller might be, Sony, is that it? Is that all you're going to show
yeah,
us?
yeah. And the controller is, I personally think, it's too similar to the existing DualSense, which is a good controller, but for the premium price they're going to charge for this, where you can just swap out the sticks and there's a couple of extra buttons, I was expecting more.
Yeah.
Similar to how Microsoft do. So
Yeah, do you know how much this thing costs?
I don't think they've announced it. You might
Yeah,
know.
I think it'll be
Um,
$150, right? Or something like
it'll
that.
be something like that with similar prices. That.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the Xbox equivalent, the Elite, doesn't actually look that different. That's the thing. I mean, to me, that looks like an Xbox controller. But yeah, I get it. I mean, this one just looks like a DualSense.
mm.
You know, literally, I didn't catch any kind of like discerning differences between the two things.
Maybe it will come out on the actual reviews that, like, let's say the D-pad's got better materials and better directional movement, and the sticks have better materials and it feels better. The triggers, I think there's probably that in that sort of level of
Yeah,
detail that it will come out. I saw the sticks are swappable,
yeah.
which I'm assuming just the height as well.
I think it's stuff like the turning circle and stuff like that.
Yeah,
They're doing that sort of thing. I mean, which is cool, but this is Gamescom. We know God of War Ragnarok's around the corner. Last of Us was around the corner. You would have thought they've got some surprises, but yet here you go. Here's our new £150, and I'm just thinking it's £150 called DualSense Edge controller, which is our Pro controller.
They-
And it's probably what they would have been posting on the PlayStation blog.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but Xbox have just can royally dropped the ball. That Sony are not going to release any news. They're just they're going to hold everything back now, aren't they?
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I don't know what it is really, but it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's complete. It's like ultra arrogance and overconfidence, which is how you lose first
Did
place
wonder that. I
position
mean, yeah,
eventually.
at first I didn't think that was the case, but now they're feeling more and more like the PS3 kind of gen, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Gonna need to get stung or bitch slapped. That's what I think
They,
it comes down to. Yeah, let's get away from Sony. Let's get away. So obviously, a more Callisto Protocol kind of like gameplay footage.
looks really good, that
Yeah,
one. I think
definitely.
that's on my list. Yeah.
Lords of the Fallen, and it's actually the second game. The original,
Oh, is it okay?
the original was launched in 2014.
Yep.
Pretty much Souls-like. A kind of indie-style game called Moving Out, Team 17. Hogwarts Legacy, which really it's a new trailer, but they kind of really themed it around dark magic. So you follow kind of obviously if you know Harry Potter, dark magic.
Yeah. I think this game looks really
Yeah,
good.
Slytherin. Some people do say that. I mean, like,
I'm reading the books with my daughter now, and they spent some money on this game. They've really brought to life, because there's been a couple of in the trailers where they actually walk through the common
yeah,
rooms
yeah,
for the houses. Each of the because there's four houses, aren't
yeah,
there?
yeah,
They've spent some money actually recreating a lot of the detail from the book. So if it has some deep RPG mechanics, because they've shown some of the gameplay
yeah,
of the fighting, and it looks quite good. This is something I'm actually interested in. Maybe not at full price though.
yeah. They've got a very rich lore, that's for sure. Very interesting universe that everybody knows and loves, and they can do a lot with it.
And yeah, exactly. I mean, they're not going to make it like kind of Destiny raid type thing. They've got good potential. Is it the Just Cause developers?
I'm not sure actually.
I think the Avalanche Studios, I think, are
Is it
involved.
Avalanche?
I
Really?
think they're not they're one of the maybe one of the partnering studios. I'm pretty sure they are. So it's got. I mean, I'll have a look as we go through the list, but
Yeah, I mean it could be good, and I think it is more of a persistent game world, isn't it? But anyway, I mean, look, so they're tackling both kind of like light and bad magic in it, which is obviously a big part of the books and in the films. So either it's going to be Expelliarmus, whatever it is, or Crucianus, good or bad, light or dark, right?
yeah.
And then I think Randy Pitchford came on stage to announce new tales from the Borderlands, one on spin-off from the Borderlands franchise. So that's coming out actually October this year. Dying Light 2, Bloody Ties DLC. Yeah, Pirate's Tale was also kind of shown off, which, to be honest, didn't look, in my eyes, very good. Marauders, which is a loot raid shooter, and had a kind of fairly weird look. Destiny 2, it's Lightfall, isn't it?
Yeah, it is
Yeah,
Lightfall. Yeah,
we'll talk a little bit more about that.
yeah. I made a mistake earlier. It was actually Beyond Light was 2 years ago. Then there was the Witch Queen.
That's
Then
right.
this new one is Lightfall. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Sonic Frontiers got a new trailer coming out 8th of November this year. It looked a lot better than the first time I saw it, but it still looked quite strange seeing Sonic in what was a kind of pseudo-realistic setting.
No studios got the conversion to 3D right for Sonic, have they?
No, no
It's just
studio.
they keep trying, don't they?
I do keep trying. I'm actually getting to the point where I'm thinking to myself, why bother? If it's a
I tell
2D
you
or
why,
2.5D game, why not?
they should have stuck to the 2D game, but the movies have done really well. I've seen the two recent films with my kids. They are actually really good. If you can get past the kind of the hybrid real life setting with humans and then Sonic, the acting and the storyline and the action for a kids movie, it's really good. I would highly recommend watching it actually, to be honest.
I do wonder why they've kind of like adapted that art style. Have they adapted that art style then? Where you got Sonic in a pseudo kind of realistic, like like the Sonic films,
Mm,
Sonic with real life actors. Pretty interesting.
yeah, yeah.
The next on the menu was Under the Waves, which is supposedly a love letter to the ocean. But I think what was actually quite interesting about this is Quantic Dreams is actually publishing it. Quantic Dreams of Rain. Was it Rain?
Yeah,
Heavy Rain,
Heavy
yeah.
Rain,
Heavy Rain.
yeah.
and
Was it Beyond Human?
Yeah, yeah,
Beyond Him, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So they're publishing this. We had Goat Simulator that comes out 17th of November this year. And what was interesting to me was this, title Return to Monkey Island, 19th of September, which some of you might remember. You might remember the original Monkey Island. It's an old 90s PC sort of adventure game. Basically, it was in between a text adventure and going, fully user controlled. For the time, it was a pretty stellar title. Yeah. So Return to Monkey Island's coming out now. Next title, Moonbreaker. This was quite interesting. So it's connected to this author. I think his name's Brandon Sanderson. What's interesting about him is that he actually completed the Wheel of Time fantasy books. Wheel of Time, well-known D&D fantasy novels. And Amazon have actually got a series, or they started a series with that. And it's basically made by the people who did Subnautica. And it's a very interesting turn-based tactical game. But really, it takes it on a little bit further in that, I mean, with a lot of these turn-based games you play on the tabletop, you literally got the kind of models, like a Warhammer game.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've retained the kind of the models in game, so rather translating them to kind of like living entities, living whatever, it's just a model. So I've done something quite interesting there. Whether it will be good or
yeah,
not sure. Friends v Friends is a deck build first-person shooter which had a really unusual art style, which I'll just basically say reminded me of what a teenager would scribble on his notebooks within a classroom. Yeah, when he's in a class that he's not that interested in. And then we had Lives of P, P equaling Pinocchio, and this title was actually also shown off by AMD in their recent announcement event for Ryzen 7000, and it's a day one on Game Pass. And this thing is a third person action game which is very Souls like. Very Souls like. Now there's more. Stranded Alien Dawn, early access in October, which is some sort of survival game. Atlas Fallen comes out in 2023. Fantasy RPG. Looked good, actually. Looked good. But what's interesting is from the people who bought you The Surge. There's a Surge 1 and 2, and it's really a sci-fi Souls-like game that's been
yeah,
quite well received. That might be one to look out for. You had the kind of video, and then you had a small snippet of gameplay, which people might have missed actually, but it looked decent. Next title they announced is something that's really kind of like interesting for me. Homeworld 3. This is actually a space-based RTS real-time strategy game. Interestingly, it's not been done by Relic, who were the original creators of Homeworld. Homeworld really at the time kind of not quite redefined, but did something with RTS that was very, very different to everybody else. Yeah. And I've said this to Al before, right? If you listen to the soundtrack of Homeworld, yeah, It's very like the the last Battlestar series. The soundtrack is very similar, and I can only think Battlestar was inspired by what happened in Homeworld because it's just too similar. Yeah. Out Genshin Impact 3.0 update. That's one for you,
I've been
obviously.
playing it already. Yep.
Yay or nay?
Actually, it's changed up the meta, so yes, it's been pretty good.
Nice.
Interesting. Honka Style Rail. I hope I pronounce it, or Honkai.
Honkai, yeah.
The trailer gave nothing away, but it's a tactical role-playing game. High on Life. Obviously, we saw this in the Xbox showcase. It was that game, that shooter, first-person shooter. I think it was based on the Rick and Morty universe, if you remember it. And it looked as if it really had potential. But they showed off what I can only describe as the worst level ever to demo. It was this bland-looking level where you had rising kind of like liquid, where the player had to kind of like really swing from point to point shooting stuff. Why they showed up, I have no idea. Hard Space Shipbreaker out on 20th September on consoles. What would I call this? It's kind of a survival, like a MMO type game. Telltale's The Expanse, which is based on a television series on Amazon. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I think this is based on some sort of 80s or 90s film. Scars Above, which reminded me a lot of Returnal in its kind of art direction. I don't know how to pronounce this, but Wide Song, which is no idea what this is actually. But all I understood from this is that they're veterans of Bethesda's Fallout and Skyrim games, basically working on it. An expansion for Age of Empires 4 was announced. Ottomans and Malians. Gotham Knights got an official villains trailer with Mr. Freeze, Harley Quinn in there. And then this really nice looking, I think it was a Chinese developed action game called Where the Winds Meet. Yeah. And what really struck me about this game was how very Chinese it was. Quite honestly, I mean, like, it didn't try and dumb it down, music, art style, very kind of like, Chinese. Very much so. Didn't try and dumb it down, but very interesting. Then it started to get a bit strange. So Kojima basically comes on and announces that he has a podcast. A podcast. You know, Kojima has a podcast starting in Spotify in September, and that Jeff Keighley is going to probably be on.
Can he even speak English? He must do, right? He's always speaking Japanese, isn't he?
Yeah. How is this going to work? I don't know. What is he going to speak about? I don't know.
It must be like game development and stuff like that. It has to be all his user experience. People are interested in that sort of stuff.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, it could be some sort of marketing ploy for whatever he's doing.
Bungie have been like sharing their engineering values and principles for how they work and how they make changes, and they've been releasing that. So when they have a weekly update, they chuck in stuff like this is how we work, and they're apparently been getting high views on that type of thing. People are interested in it. It creates more
Engagement and connection.
engagement and sympathy for developers. They're all getting abused on social media websites, aren't
Yeah.
they?
Oh, yeah. That is actually quite interesting. But I do wonder what he's going to have in it. I do wonder if it's some sort of short-term thing he's doing or not. Not sure.
Kojima is all about long-term changing up the game, as in the game model way of doing things, right?
Yeah, what a game is really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. And moving on, Part Beyond, which is obviously like very much like Bullfrog's old seminal theme park game. And then another strange thing. We had a car with gaming features that was Pokemon themed in the show. They literally got a mini.
I saw that
Yeah.
one actually. Yeah.
It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. Most bizarre thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, the thing is, yeah, I've got three sisters. The younger one is of that generation where they obsessed about Pokemon, and they were more attached to these type of things, and she would go out and buy a car themed on something silly like this. So whereas we're old fogies, right, compared to that generation. So
True. Moving on, Warhammer 40,000 Dark Tide. So small gameplay, looking good. I really actually want to play this one with you guys because I think we'd have a lot
Yeah,
of fun with
no,
this.
it looks. I mean, I've never been attracted to Warhammer, but I have to say the game looks good.
Yeah. It looks like a lot of fun. I mean the Vermintide game they did, which is also based on the other side of Warhammer, which is the more D&D version of it, was a lot of fun. Shallow, but a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Then we had Blacktail, A Witch's Fate, first-person fantasy action game. Phantom Hellcat, which was a third in 2.5D action game. Crossfire X, which is a well-known Xbox, I think it's an exclusive. Dorf Ramantech was coming to Switch. The Outcast Trials, which is a horror game, looks pretty horrible, if I'm being honest with you. Yeah. And then the finals, which is a shooter with a game show format, guessing very much like the Running Man, but obviously, FPS. And Dead Island 2, which actually looked good. And I remember Dead Island. I mean, that was one of the last games I saw at E3 where I actually spoke to the developers about Dead Island. So
I
it's
remember the trailer. He was really popular at the
yeah,
time. Remember?
it's looking
Yeah.
good. It's a sequel that's been promised for a while but never come out.
Do you think? Look at I mean, this is a boring list. Can you
Yep.
imagine Jeff Keighley putting his name behind this list of announcement?
I don't think he's got
It's
much of a
just,
choice.
yeah, it's embarrassing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really?
this is what he can get. The thing about this list, right? When you read through it, there are no what you would call really big hitters, if you know what I mean. Not
And
one.
you know what? It's not just this. I was speaking to Al before. E3 wasn't for me banging either this year, and it's almost like we've all got big, massive back catalogs. I'm more excited about going through my back catalogue and even games that aren't on my catalogue that I would that want to play that I haven't bought yet than actually anything forward looking at the moment,
I mean, yeah.
which is not a good place to
I
be.
mean, think about it. I mean, what did Sony do? Here's our DualSense Edge. Here's a video. We're not even going to go there, right? But here's a video that we're going to post anyway. Knock yourselves out. Yeah.
I don't understand that if they even had stuff like, look, we've got this game out. Here's an extra skin, extra weapon, extra car. Like, chuck some Gran Turismo stuff in there. Like it's like nothing.
It's not that important to them. That's the thing.
Yeah,
It's not that important. It's not that important for
it's a,
Xbox either.
yeah, just a bit disappointing to
I
be
mean,
honest.
yeah. I mean, look at the list. I mean, there's Activision, EA, Ubisoft.
They chuck nothing in there as well. So what? Okay, these are game announcements. How about physically at Gamescom? Were you able to play some of the games that are coming out
I think so.
that aren't on this list?
Uh, no. I think anything that you could have played would be on this list. Yeah, if you like.
Yeah, okay.
The really big hitters, like I mean, you weren't going to go to Gamescom and play Ragnarok, God of War Ragnarok. You weren't going to go there and play The Last of Us Part One. That wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to die, isn't it, Gamescom then? If we're heading
Well,
this way.
yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, it just depends. I mean, I still maintain, right, you still need some sort of physical event for games. Yeah. But you also need the big players to be basically a bit more invested than they are. Like back in the days of E3 when it was up there, Sony, Microsoft, all the big publishers were there, no doubt about that. And they used to drop some money, yeah, to be there, and also the events they did. I mean, I told you about the story. There was one event I did, the Sony one,
Yeah.
where they just basically fed everybody that was at the event. They literally fed them all. If you wanted to be fed.
Well, well. I think the physical
Yeah,
Gamescom has got
they've
two
got
more
to change the
years and it's
format.
done.
I think
I just
they've got to change it.
yeah, but then the format's going to have more. I'm talking about the physical side of the show, right? It's going to have more demos or more games, or you get like, but they won't do that well, will they? Because it's harder work, and games are getting more complicated to build. Forget the
Oh yeah, yeah.
AAA games, even like the mid-tier games are
The,
getting
the
more
mid tier
complicated
was
to make.
like
They don't have time to make
I'm
demos
guessing
anymore.
AAA from 5 years ago. The indies are, they're special as well. I mean, these are not games that people don't spend £1 million on.
Yeah. I mean, just out of interest, like if you were to put a percentage of the games on that list you've just gone through that you're even
Yeah, let
remotely
me have a quick
interested in, like
quick buzz through it.
about 5%
Five
probably for
percent.
me.
Yeah, similar.
Yeah, and that's 5% is what I'd
Wow.
like to play. Probably 10% is actually what I'm interested in following because it just seems interesting. But it's nothing more than that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's because we get more choice these days or not, but
Yeah.
I think a lot of this is because the really big players are just not engaging. They're not invested in these shows anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is
Yeah,
a shame.
it may just depends
It's
on what
done.
they get
It's
out of
done
it,
for me.
right? So if there's nothing they're gonna get actually get out of it in comparison to what they're already announcing, then kind of defeats the purpose, right? So there has to be a reason for you to be
Yeah,
there.
I reckon they get more eyes on each of these games by just doing one or two
yeah,
announcements on Twitter, and then YouTubers will
Mm,
just bake it into their shows, and then they get
correct.
more eyes on the,
yeah,
the
Correct. And
games.
Sony and people
That
like
way it
Sony
makes it
know that.
something big bang show.
They see the numbers.
Yeah, and there's people like us as well, right, who actually like a little bit
Yeah,
of trickle of news throughout the whole year.
yeah, because it's a lot.
And then we're
It's like
scared to watch these
it's an
2 3 hour
investment in
shows.
time. And actually,
it's
if
huge
there's
investment.
only like 5% of the stuff is actually any of interest, then is it effective use? It just doesn't.
Yeah, there were big titles in here that we were interested in. Our perspective would, I think, somewhat change. But the fact is that they were not. What we really want to see isn't here.
So you interesting. You mentioned before they're going to have to change things. How do you think they could do that?
Right now, I think a lot of events, why they exist, is probably a lot to do with marketing. You know, and getting kind of the word out for games and announcements. But I think really, that side of things is probably, as you said, better served by just going down the kind of social media and internet route. They'll get as much, if not more, engagement doing that route. Yeah. So really, what are we left with? I mean, at the end of the day, I think festival type of format where you're going there, you just going in there, play games, enjoy the kind of gaming culture of things. Maybe even have speakers from the dev community who just want to talk about what it's like to develop a game rather than trying to kind of sell you the game, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, they'll already have different shows for that, don't they?
Yeah, but maybe those shows are the shows that will grow, and maybe like with Gamescom in, you know, that's how they need to evolve. Even with E3, right? I mean, I don't think E3 can continue the way it is. Yeah,
So okay, so if we take Genshin Impact, right? I knew about the 3.0 update well before Gamescom because they do their own updates and stuff. The only reason why I would go to Gamescom for a Genshin Impact thing is for merch. Like it'd have to be exclusive merch. It has to be a reason for me to be there for stuff, and like otherwise, it's a bit pointless. That's the sort of thing I'd be looking for.
Yeah, I always, maybe this is my wrong perception. I always thought Gamescom was early demos of games to get you really excited about them. And I used to remember watching on YouTube people actually standing at the stands with the controllers in their hand and the reactions, and they used to get me kind of hyped up. But they don't seem to do that anymore. So
with the internet, I doubt it. I mean, games trailers and videos and gameplay walkthroughs are there's so much of it. I
yeah,
I just think they need a different kind of
I,
format and direction with some of this stuff.
I also wonder whether the new, because we're getting older now, right? The newer generation like a less variety of games, and they're more into the kind of the big staples of the Call of Duties and your Fortnites, and maybe they'll go off piste and play another smaller separate game, which probably explains why. Could be another reason why Game Pass and these companies are consolidating under these big brands, because they know it's coming. They're getting less eyes on their games because people are getting sucked into
Right.
the bigger franchises. But it's very
It's
different when
ironic, isn't it?
like with Netflix. Yeah, whereas it's like with Apple Music or Netflix, right? You're more likely to look at other stuff, other music or other shows if you're paying that one-off subscription.
Yeah,
And so therefore, if that trend is happening, what we're seeing in this event is a symptom of that, which is far less meaty
yeah.
things
But
to
I would also counter that, though, and I would say with these services, whether it be music or games or something or film or something else, right? You do get to kind of look at stuff that you would normally look at, but I don't think you engage in it as long as you would.
No, I agree. But the other kind of strand of what I'm saying is and I'm asking the open question here. We've always been recently. It's always been there's more games coming out, more games than you can ever play, and therefore there's lots of news, and that's been supporting all of these events such as Gamescom and E3. Are we now entering a world where there are going to be less games and less news? Because it certainly feels like that this year, COVID or no COVID, right? And hence why we've got this filler on here. I mean, I don't have to answer that question, but I just it's just an interesting theme that I think may be happening. I've got no evidence for that, but
I think that's definitely a conversation for another day. That's actually quite an interesting one. There's a lot of contradictions in there, you know.
yeah, yeah,
It'd be interesting to explore that. But let's move on. Let's move on because obviously we talked at length about games, and you know, it kind of feels like they need to change the format. Doesn't feel like it's what it was. But there were another two well in my eyes noteworthy anyway. There was obviously the Destiny 2 showcase, and they've got the new expansion DLC that arrives, I think, end of February, right, next year.
yeah. So I can give you some of the highlights then, right? So they've announced a new DLC, Lightfall, coming out in February, and they've moved away from a September October release to this new February one. It started because they delayed the Witch Queen, but I think it suited them because it moves them away from the other games coming out towards the Christmas period, because things are more quiet in February. Prior to this event, about 2 or 3 years ago, they already announced 3 expansions that are now 4 expansions because they said they couldn't fit them all in 3. So they had already put the roadmap right. So this is another one of those DLCs to complete the roadmap. As you've already called out, they're introducing a new planet on Neptune, which is really interesting because up to this point, all of the locations are being very apocalyptic, broken buildings, very dull, bland colours, and some of the dungeons have been more kind of brighter colours, but they've really lent into this cyberpunk kind of feel on Neptune.
Looks like a living planet they're on.
Yeah, it's the background story there's the last city on Earth where all the humans live. A colony started on Neptune, hidden away. So it's just been revealed, and I don't know the full story, but it's just been recently revealed. Hence why it's actually, for once, like nice coloured buildings and bright. It's like I said, it's like a cyberpunk feel, which is really interesting. It almost looked like a new game.
Hmm.
That's what everybody was
Hmm.
saying. And a bit of a going off piece slightly, a little bit. The rumor is, well, not a rumor, but they've already said after they complete the Light and Dark saga, which is the next expansion after this, which is called Final Shape. Destiny's going to continue. They're going to take it a different direction, right? And this DLC feels like they're experimenting with where they're going to go in next in a different color
Yeah.
palette. They've even got a race that's on this planet. They're called Cloud Striders, and it's almost it's like nothing else you've seen in Destiny, right? They're even releasing, giving if you pre-order the DLC, they're giving away a gun. It's a merge between an auto rifle, a rocket launcher. Again, is another example of them just experimenting with the different themes. So that was cool. The other thing that they announced was a new subclass. Everyone thought it was going to be a dark subclass, but they were suspecting it was going to be green. But it's not actually a dark subclass. It's meant to be a play on. It's called Strand, and it's meant to be a play on pulling on strings through different dimensions to bring energy and do all of these kind of superpower moves. But for some reason, everyone thought it was going to be green coloured, which came out to be true. What they've at least marketed so far is there's a significant grapple hook mechanic, which is quite interesting because the level design is probably going to have a far more verticality than any other Destiny game so far.
That's the sense I got from the trailer.
Yeah, it has, and you get some verticality in Destiny where might do some big drops. You might just drop off, I don't know, like a large ledge, and it goes on for a long time. Almost the fact that you almost get that kind of like as if you're jumping out of an aeroplane kind of feeling, which is quite cool. So again, that's just changing the direction of the gameplay. I think. I think that's probably the key. Oh no, actually, there are a few other things. They finally announced a in-game LFG system.
NFG.
Right?
Lucky for group.
Yeah. There was also you can have loadouts in the game, which sounds crazy because the game's been at what 8 years now.
Yeah.
And you can have loadouts by using a third-party app, but they're building it into the game, right? And then there were a couple of other things like for new players as well, which to be honest, it didn't look that appealing. There was something called accommodation system, where if you have Sherpas for the raid, or even your teammates, you can give them certain cards, which just to say you've been a good vocal person, or you've been covering my back, and it's just to encourage. I think it's probably going to help with the kind of the LFG kind of system where you can say if you're looking for someone who's a Sherpa who's not who doesn't have this long list of requirements for you to get in and are very very patient, that will come out through this system. Or if someone is like more fun to play with or cracking jokes, it's quite an interesting spin. How effective it will be, I don't know, but those are the kind of the gist of the things that they announced. I personally was quite disappointed with the show, to be honest. As I've said before, my expectations are high, right? The game is feeling very stale to me. Now, when they came out with the last DLC, which was the Witch Queen and Beyond Light, but before that, the campaigns were good, the new subclasses were good. But what happens is after the first 3-4 weeks, and it's a live game service, they get you playing the same old strikes, the same maps, and they change nothing in those. We've got one new PvP map in 3 years, right? If you look at the breakdown of what this game has got, they're not talking about any changes to. There's a PvEP game mode, no changes to that. There's no significant change to the number of strikes, and there's nothing about PvP. And they would put that in the marketing now if they're going to do some big changes to that, because it would justify the price. They're increasing the price by £20 as well, so they're increasing there. I was seriously considering just walking away, as I've said to you guys, right?
Well,
where I've landed is I can't walk away because Sony have bought into them. There's going to be TV shows. There'll be a new game. I've spent so much time finding a good raid team and a community. I'm going to stick with it, but I'll just play intensely when it comes out in February, and then I'll play here and there, raiding here and there. But I'll use the rest of the time to play other games. And I've tried to walk away and I can't. But I was very disappointed with the show. I think it will be good, a good DLC, but I just expect more.
Yeah, but that's probably because they're probably just focusing on Destiny 3 or something, and probably with COVID and other things, there's been other distractions which are causing them to delay stuff. So the amount of content is probably quite limited. But they've never really, I think with Destiny, they've never really fixed that game engine problem anyway. So they've their release cycle of content has always been slow,
Yeah.
and it's never really changed.
So Al, I agree with you to a point, but they have lied to the community consistently.
Well, but it's been like that since Destiny 1.
Yeah, exactly, and exactly,
Very true.
and they've promised we're gonna add, they've promised we're gonna fix PvP, we're relaunching everything. They have clearly worked out that they can release just enough, get the money, keep the audience going that's already there, because they're not going to bring many new players in. Although they said they've had the largest number of new players, 4 million new players last year. But how many of those stick around, I don't know, right? But I think that they've got an asset here they can sweat,
Hmm.
and they've spent their money making whatever is Destiny 3, whether they call it that or not. They've already announced they make other games in the pipeline, at least 2 or 3, it could be even more. TV shows, probably movies. All their effort is in that space.
Mm, mm.
They've expanded their studio, another physical location. I mean, God knows, I think they're nearly up to 1,000 people in the studio. It might even be more. They've got people, and it's probably the right business decision. They've worked out the sweet spot of not overcommitting on this game and doing just enough and get the money coming in, which will fund all their new games. Which is just still, which is probably right for them, but it's disappointing as a Destiny player.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not really the most consumer-friendly way of doing it, but it is a business after all, right? So
Yeah,
you can understand what they're doing, but like you say, I think some of the promises and unfortunately, it just feels like it's quite consistent in terms
Yeah.
of what I've seen in the past with them, and that's why I didn't really bother with two.
Gamers have
yeah,
short memories, guys.
yeah. I'm a classic example of them as well. I was like, I'm definitely walking away if I see I see almost like a non-event, and there was a bit of a non-event for me. Then I was like, I'm quitting until, like, I don't know, 3 years time when there's a new game coming out. But here I am. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just stick with it. The show was weird, I thought, as well. The one for Witch Queen, they showed far more gameplay. In this one, it was a lot of this. There's a big tag at the top saying still in development and pre-production and subject to change, and they, it was in pretty much all of the gameplay. They had more talking about how great the game is going to be, and versus actually showing it. Whereas last year they showed more, and the previous year they showed more. So that has me a little bit more nervous, actually, to be honest. But
It's the exact polar
um,
opposite to Sony, who basically don't talk at all, just show you a trailer. Here you go, here's your trailer, here's some gameplay,
yeah,
we're not going to talk.
just to close up the thing, the show was poor for me. The YouTubers have all well received it. I haven't seen many people critique it, but I think they've all lowered their expectations, right? And
Yeah,
if any of those community and there's say anything bad, then they're going to lose all of their viewership as well, and their trust.
Mm.
It's become a niche. Although it's a popular game in terms of an MMO game, it's still very niche in terms of numbers.
Yep. Yep.
And I would imagine those numbers are going to continue to go down until they finish the saga and they can reboot, relaunch, have all the new game engine, new systems, and maybe have a pipeline of more regular content delivery. Yeah, that's it with the show. I just want to. I mean, if you guys have got any more questions on that, throw them in now. But I was going to just cover off the latest season update as well. They have 4 seasons every year. The latest season is pirate themed,
Plunder or
and
something,
for
isn't
me,
it? Plunder,
Plunder. That's the one. It's season of Plunder again. Filler game modes, filler content. The skins and the gun ornaments are all cool. They've had a good job with that. But the gameplay stuff is all filler. I'm ignoring it. But one interesting thing is that they've re-released the Oryx raid. The name fails me. What's it called?
Fallen King or something?
King's Fall.
Kingsfall, yeah.
Sorry, which I haven't played yet, but it looks quite good from the videos that I've seen, as in it's in the latest because they have improved the game engine, the lighting and everything. It is much better, and I've heard good reviews from people in terms of the guns, the gameplay, and nostalgia of it. So I'm looking forward to playing that, but that's not going to last me 6 months. There's one more dungeon coming out, which is a 3-player activity. All the dungeons have been good so far. I have to give it to them. Raids and dungeons is Destiny. They're quality. Yeah, whether they will last 6 months or a year, questionable. But they are the real meat, bread, and butter for people who are hardcore players in the game. Because there's no other game can touch those type of modes for a first-person shooter. And I can't see anybody investing the money to kind of compete with them. It's just never going to happen. So, but yeah, that's the
Yeah,
show.
I like the look of the new trailer. I gotta admit, it just strikes me they're gonna do something a little bit different in terms of the environment this time.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on from Destiny. And the last thing I kind of want to talk about in this topic was Warframe TennoCon 2022. Now, was this a non-event? I'm not sure it was because as I was kind of like prepping for this, I kind of realised something about Digital Extremes, who basically obviously do Warframe. They've always had an online presence, and they've been doing TennoCon for about 7 years now. Off their own back, really. So I got the sense they kind of like know what to do with this sort of stuff and appease their fans and whatnot. Putting that aside, what was interesting to me and what they kind of they sort of announced it, but they sort of didn't because it was in the one of the keynote talks with the devs. They talked about this parity event. Okay, so what happens with obviously this live service game is that let's say every 2 weeks a specific vendor makes an appearance in a specific location, and then obviously players flock to this vendor to buy whatever item. So what they explained was that the PC and console variants of the game are running on different schedules, and that's all part of what happens in the on the database backend. So what they're doing is syncing that up between all the actual platforms, so they can implement cross-play and cross-save. Yeah,
That's a huge one. We've been asking. That's been the one thing that I've been looking for
and I
from.
thought that might be
Yeah.
interesting for you, Al. They actually said, and I thought to myself, okay, now I can start playing this game again. Right, thank you. I can start playing this game again. Now, further to that, they also did this Zariman custom PC giveaway. That picture that obviously anybody just listening to the audio won't see. That is a custom PC.
I thought that was some kind of in-game picture. Sorry.
No, it's a PC they got custom built as a giveaway. It's a one-off build. So I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I mean, if you're going to give anything away, this is what you should give away. This is the type of thing that, that's a giveaway. I don't know the spec of the PC, however. But with a case like that, you'd imagine it's a pretty good PC in there. And then, what did they really announce game-wise in TennoCon? Warframe always has. They've got no problem with content. They've got almost too much of it, yeah. But they've got this new thing called, how do I pronounce this? The Divari Paradox. This thing is a new open world expansion. Obviously, still free. But I was watching the gameplay video of it, and what it reminds me of is a few things. It reminds me of Okami, a PS2 kind of era game, GameCube era game. It reminds me of Ghost of Tsushima, and it reminds me of Witcher 3. And the reason for that, there's a lot of time spent on horseback or a mount.
Mm.
It's third person, and it takes place, I think, between specific expansions and events. And paradox, meaning there's time travel involved in it. And the actual first mission, the you could call it like a primer mission of it, open world, black and white, had your player basically doing stuff that basically brought the color back to the land. So that for me, right? Oh, that feels like a little bit Ghost of Tsushima with a black and white kind of presentation, and a Kami where you as a player bring back life to the world, basically getting color back into it. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
at times, basically getting on that steed reminded me of Witcher 3. So it's a very interesting direction they're taking with some of this stuff. Very interesting.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the. I think they've had an open world
Yeah,
section
yeah.
a long time back, right? But I guess it's just they're doing it again with an interesting style
Yeah,
to it.
this feels a bit more narrative driven than the other open worlds. They talked a little bit about this other kind of DLC coming up called Veilbreaker. I'm going to introduce a new tenor, new character. Was it Styanax? And it's got to have new mechanics, which it took through, I think, one of the campaigns. And they've now got 50 distinct Warframes, 50 distinct characters that you can play with, build up, and do all that sort of thing. Yeah, that for me was not quite a non-event. It was just to form. That's what they've always been doing.
They've all got a reputation of just always having lots of content, haven't
Yeah,
they?
overwhelmingly so, I think.
Too
Yeah,
much, yeah, too
but they
much.
don't have a
But
content
is it
problem.
quality? Is it quality though?
No, I think it's this cross play, cross save thing is huge. I think the accessibility that it will do from that will make it much more interesting.
Jay, were you talking about the content they release? Is it quality? Is
Yes.
it quality?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yes, it
right. Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's been as far as I've seen. Especially I played it. I'd never played to really much in depth, but it doesn't seem buggy or anything. So it seems pretty well polished.
I mean, I think something like Destiny and Bungie seems a little bit more polished. But then again, you can say that about Destiny and Bungie versus almost everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. But is that because normally first-person games always feel they're slightly more polished than third-person because the mechanic because you can it's the character moving from that angle that looks more janky if it's not. You sure it's not that, or
No,
do you
no.
mean the kind of polish
Just the
of like the
polish and the
weapons?
art
Yeah.
direction
Okay.
and those sorts of kind of
Yeah.
like
Okay.
things that,
Yeah.
production
Yeah.
values. And don't
Yeah.
get me
Okay.
wrong, I mean, Digital Extremes have very good production values and it's getting better and better, as much as I can see. But Bungie and Destiny, I mean, you know, that's AAA. Whereas Warframe, it's approaching that. Just it just doesn't feel as well realized in many ways.
Yeah.
But it's still really good. Remember, it's an absolute free to play game as well. Yeah, how they do
Yeah.
it, I have no idea. But it's
There's enough people that buy stuff from it. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
this is the thing with good I think free to play models that actually think about the to make the game actually fun and actually getting the players to purchase based on what they're enjoying out of the game, not to pay to win and all this other
yeah,
stuff, right? So I think they actually do it really well, so that actually people buy the other stuff around it, some skins, the odd credit for Warframes, the odd bit of this for that, but there's still people that play it will buy stuff in and around it, not necessarily to pay
yeah,
to win reasons. So it's a pretty good
yeah,
model.
definitely. And the other thing that I haven't really talked about is they've got a new game, Soulframe, which is more of D&D, if you can call it that. RPG, third person. Obviously not sci-fi, okay, but still has a real interesting, distinct art style. Your typical, digital extremes, art style. So they announced that and had some kind of gameplay video and cinematics for that.
Yeah. I saw the trailer for that. It looked like same sort of character style
Mm.
models and movement as
Yeah,
the
yeah,
main
definitely,
Warframe. So they're
definitely.
probably
I mean, you imagine the art team's the same, wouldn't you? So
Yeah, I imagine they just reuse the engine, right? Reuse some of the assets that you've already got and expand it, right? So as long as it works out well, then I think it's a good thing to branch off to another game. So
that's all I'm going to talk about in terms of Warframe and Con and Digital Extremes. But yeah, I mean they're going well. I mean, as an event, yeah, it was an event, it wasn't a non-event. But largely because I found out that cross-play and cross-save is finally coming, and what they're doing, looks as impressive as usual. And guys, I think with that said, let's move on to the next topic. Okay, guys, the next topic I want to talk about, I don't know, I would call it the war of words, but I guess it's getting close to that between PlayStation and Xbox. And I've titled this one PlayStation Xbox Dance Off because that's what it really feels like. So, this has all come about because the Brazilian regulators have published information based on feedback on the Activision and Blizzard purchase by Microsoft. What I understand is that this particular regulator, and maybe actually all regulators, ask questions of concerned parties. In this case, tech and gaming companies like the Amazons, Googles, Sony themselves, Ubisoft, Namco, etc. Okay, and maybe all regulators do this, but perhaps the Brazilian regulator is the only one that actually publicly published the information. What do we get? Well, clearly Sony objects to it. Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll kind of read the quite lengthy response from or answer from Sony. So here it goes. According to a 2019 study, the importance of Call of Duty to entertainment in general is indescribable. The brand was the only video IP to break into the top 10 of all entertainment brands among fans, joining powerhouses such as Star Wars, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, and Lord of the Rings. Call of Duty is so popular that it influences users' choice of console, and its community of loyal users is entrenched enough that even if a competitor had the budget to develop a similar product, it would not be able to rival it. Each annual Call of Duty release takes around 3 to 5 years to develop. As Activision releases one Call of Duty game per year, this equates to an annual investment of hundreds of millions of dollars. Approximately 1,200 people work on each version, and another 1,500 are involved in publishing and distribution. Thus, Call of Duty alone has more developers than most games companies employ across its entire development portfolio, including AAA studios. Also, given its plan to recruit 2,000 additional developers by 2021, Activision probably expects Call of Duty to be even more successful in the future. No other developer can devote the same level of resources, expertise in game development. Even if they could do that, Call of Duty is overly entrenched, so no rival, no matter how relevant they are, can catch up. It is synonymous with first person shooter games and essentially defines the category. This is also demonstrated by player engagement on social media. Call of Duty has over 24 million followers on Facebook versus 7 million for Battlefield, and over 12 million followers on Instagram versus 2 million for Battlefield. To say the least, players would be unlikely to switch to alternative games as they would lose that familiarity, those skills, and even friends they have made playing the Call of Duty games. Even in weaker years like 2021, Call of Duty Call of Duty still managed to outperform most other games by a considerable margin. Call of Duty Vanguard 2021, for example, was widely regarded as weaker than previous year's titles, but was still one of the best-selling games of 2021. In other words, even in a bad year, players remain loyal to the brand and continue to buy the game. So that was a rather lengthy response that Sony had, or answer that Sony had, just to articulate how they felt about the actual acquisition.
But sorry, isn't there a nuance that this is specifically in Brazil only where it leaked? Because the way the laws are, they have to be more transparent. The only reason I'm bringing that up is because it's a developing country, isn't it? And whether these kind of like ruthless tactics is a bit more the norm there versus in places where we live, like the UK or the US. Because ultimately, we're going to ask the question: is there like some culture change and dirty tactics being played versus is that the norm of how things are done within that region or country?
Potentially, but equally, I just wonder, like, if the regulators, whatever country, ask these questions, and the only difference is that the Brazilian authorities just publish it, make it kind of like public,
Yeah.
whether these, and for all I know, and for all we know, was the standard Sony response to any regulator.
Yeah,
Yeah,
could be. Yeah.
because obviously with regulators, you know, you have to be super careful about how you respond. I'm guessing they employ people to kind of like write these responses.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is But this is about Sony objecting Microsoft's purchase
Yeah,
of Activision Blizzard, right?
correct.
But what's that got to do with the Brazilian regulator?
Well, they're going through the process of approving the purchase now, from region
But
to
why?
region to
Why?
region.
But why?
Yeah,
So they
region
have to go.
region to region.
Yeah, it's region by region. That's the difference. Yeah, they have to.
But why specifically Brazil then?
Because
I
Brazil,
mean, if
yeah,
anything, you'd be selling of the game.
they have to go from region to region. So obviously, all the local regulators get, involved. But the difference with Brazil is that they've made the information public because they
Mm.
can. Whereas like the UK or the US or anybody else, they're not going to make that sort of thing public. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the main difference, and that's how people have learned all of this. Yeah. And Sony, again, they're the only ones who have kind of really
Yeah.
come out and basically, objected openly.
Okay. So you're saying this would be a stock response to any regulator, and more specifically, probably in the US, where this would apply more in terms of the
Yeah,
company
I
law.
think it is. I mean, you can't imagine Jim Ryan for every kind of like question he asks, kind of like typing out something new, right? He's got the lawyers, right, to write up a stock response, like you would do, like say for a bank and their regulators, right? You don't have anybody write kind of response to a regulator, you know. You have a person who knows what they're doing, right response, yeah, and that person not even the CEO. But it's just that it so happens that it's now been made public, and obviously what that kind of says to us is that Sony are not that happy about it. They've got something to lose, obviously, yeah. Well, obviously.
Yeah, but obviously there'll be loads of sales and stuff around Call of Duty, but then I've not played a Call of Duty game in that God knows how
Yeah,
many
you
years.
don't, Al. But there are millions of other people who do. That's the problem.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I don't, but there's
Yeah, there's
millions of
still
other
two.
people,
Yeah.
and that's the problem with it.
It. So I don't play them properly, but I've played a couple of the betas over the last 3 years. I've actually done that fairly consistently. The gun mechanics, they have the same feel and weight as Destiny. It's come on a long way. So if you like the boots and the ground feel, there's no other game like it. It really is like they're in that genre. They're the best. There is some weight
No,
behind that.
that's right. And the
No one else is
cadence
going
they
to catch
have
up
in,
with
in
them.
releasing new COD games and the quality they maintain with every COD game, it's nothing to be scoffed at. It's quite impressive actually. I mean, even if you don't like the COD games, what they're able to do and the way that the machine that's behind it, that's impressive. But let's move on to the Microsoft response. So what Microsoft said is pretty much this. Only one third party, Sony, presented materially different opinions than the applicants and the other third parties consulted by the SG. Sony is isolated in its understanding and curiously even contradicts itself in response to the letter, as will be detailed below. Microsoft's ability to continue expanding Game Pass has been obstructed by Sony's desire to inhibit such growth. Sony pays for blocking rights to prevent developers from adding content to Game Pass and other competing subscription services. It only reveals once again a fear about an innovative business model that offers high quality content at low cost to gamers, threatening a leadership that has been forged from device centric, exclusive focused strategy over the years. So there you have it. Sony objects, Xbox responds. I mean, is it anything that we didn't expect, if you know what I mean? It's kind of how I kind of look at it now. It's almost a difference in ideologies and business models. That's where the battlegrounds lie now. And without even drilling into the facts, I mean, they're both big corporates. They're both as bad as each other. They've both played the kind of exclusivity line plenty of times. I mean, what Microsoft are ultimately doing right now is they're not exclusive, but they've got a model whereby they're saying we're not exclusive, but why the hell would you play it anywhere else? Yeah, because this is how much it costs here.
If this goes through, and I think it will,
Yeah, I think it will.
Sony are shafted, I think, because I don't think they can produce enough first-party games to add enough weight against the weight that's coming on Game Pass. So, I think Sony are well within their right to object in the way that they have,
But
because
but this is
these are normal tactics.
but
Oh
And
yeah,
one,
you
yeah.
know I don't
Totally.
think. I mean, he even says that Xbox aren't. Call of Duty will still be available on on Sony as a platform, right? Doesn't mean it has to be on their subscription service, but just the fact that it's about the game passing seems like the main objection here. Just seems really weird that they're focusing on
Yeah.
just Game Pass.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, think about this, right? You can either outright kill the opposition with a stab to the heart, or you can cut the opposition with a slash to the artery and allow them to bleed slowly. And I kind of think the Game Pass approach is the bleed slowly approach. Because over time, people will kind of see the value and they'll say, well, why am I paying £70 for this?
Yeah,
Or I could just pay this for this. And over time, slowly, Sony's mind share and the community will start to get drained. That's pretty much what I think they're thinking. And Microsoft knows exactly what they're doing. Yeah, we shouldn't look at them as the good Samaritans either. They know exactly what they're doing.
yeah,
These are the battle lines right now, and it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. And I agree with Jay to a point where he's saying like, if this deal goes through, Sony are screwed. I think in the long term they're screwed. Yeah, in
yeah.
the long
That's what
term.
that's what I meant. That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
In the short term, they've still got deals, and we know they're going to have COD games for at least 2 years on the platform, so that's okay. And even Microsoft have said that COD's going to be available on PlayStation in Game Pass on the same day. All that is bad optics for Sony.
yeah,
That's all it is. It's bad optics for Sony.
Yeah, it'll take a while for because remember that there's probably of the gaming community. I'm making this up, right? I'm guesstimating that 20% at max, or maybe let's call it argument say 30% are up to date with recent news, right? There's probably a bunch of people who will continue playing on the PlayStation, and keep paying for it every year, not realizing they can get it on Game Pass. But the word will get out eventually, and then what?
Yeah.
Once you're on Game Pass, once you're on, so whether means it is a Xbox exclusive or one of the games that are part of this deal, and there's so many of them, you're on, you're on. It's going to be very hard to justify the next purchase of a Sony game for £60.
I do think, I was saying to Al, I think last podcast, like Game Pass is
mm,
not the only way to win. It's one way to win, but equally, what Sony are doing now isn't really the way to win. They need to augment what they have to stay competitive, whether it's to grow their services, properly, or something else. That's the thing. I mean, I think what I would think is that they
mm.
can't be static in this. It'll be interesting. I mean, it'll be interesting.
I mean, as Microsoft even said that they're going to stop selling Call of Duty on Sony platform. Is that what they've said?
They don't have to. They don't have to. All they can have to do is show people the value proposition
Mm.
that they have on Game Pass. In fact, it's actually quite a strong thing for them to have Call of Duty games on a PlayStation console for £70 or US dollars. Because number one, they'll be able to demonstrate conclusively the value proposition of Game Pass to whatever gamer, and they're still going to
Mm.
basically make money off Sony.
I mean, for the price you pay
Double
for
edged.
the game once, you get like what 3 or 4 months, or even longer, of Game Pass. You could play the game anyway.
Mm,
It's a complete Trojan horse.
that's totally what it is, and it's about value. Sony have got to basically show value in their own way, in
Yeah,
the long term.
through their own subscription service or something.
It's a long term play. It's a long term play, definitely. You're bleeding your opponent. You're taking away their ability to fight. That's how I've always looked at Games Pass. Actually, take away their ability to fight.
There'll be a book written on how good
But
that approach is.
But we've been saying on the podcast for a while around, is Game Pass actually making any money? Right? I think they're just slowly bleeding themselves, but not to the same it's not the same extent as bleeding Sony out even more. I guess it's just a game of attrition.
Yeah, exactly, Al. Now, I think on this, Microsoft, we know, much bigger company, they can fund this thing for a long time, yeah. But equally, huge value now, but really, it has to be because of the competition. If over time the competition isn't really there anymore, what's going to happen? They can charge more. That's the reality. Right now, it has to be the value they give it at because they've got big competition in Sony. Over time, if that competition becomes weaker and weaker and weaker, well, we're the leaders now. We can do what we want, and that's always been the way.
So what I would say to Sony is they should do something with EA, get Apex Legends on it, in some way. That's the only competition they've got, really.
No, I don't think it's anywhere near. Yeah, I don't think it's the same weight in my eyes.
Yeah, potentially. It'd be interesting. I mean, what they need to do is basically stop things going on to Games Pass that are important. How they do it is another thing. So let's move on from that, and I'll say like there's only one bright spot for Sony in all of this, in that the UK authorities are actually concerned by this Activision Blizzard purchase by Microsoft, and they actually do believe it could harm PlayStation. So the deal may now be referred to the phase 2 investigation. Don't know what that means, but I think they had 5 days to submit a response, and then after that 5 days, it was going to go to this phase 2 investigation.
But if it doesn't, how does it work? I don't know if you know, but do you have to get approval from all regions for the whole deal to go ahead?
I can't see how. This is the companies are, I guess, well, Blizzard is global. I mean, you've got plants in like France and other places, but surely the regulators can only challenge it if the companies are actually registered locations in those countries, right? So it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense that they can block this stuff.
No, the EU will be different though, won't it? The UK regulator might say, "Well, we don't approve this thing."
That's the only thing they could do. That's the only thing they could do. Yeah.
That's pretty what it is. Yeah, it's basically you have a market here. The market, you have to follow the rules of the market. This is what it's really all about.
Yeah, but it's a company takeover. It's a company takeover.
Yeah,
it's
so
not,
you could. Yeah, no, but it's like Netflix, right? They can only show certain content in certain regions and certain countries. It's a US company. They've got data centers around the world, but how they actually deploy each instance into each country has to be abiding by those laws, right?
That's right. So it's all about that. It's all about being able to do business in that region.
But what the implication is, the UK can't stop the overall merger.
They can't.
That's what Al is trying to say.
They can
stop the deployment of Call of Duty in Game Pass in the UK potentially.
Yeah, potentially.
They can't stop the merger.
The reality is, the UK, regardless of what we think the size is an important market, and when they speak, people will kind of take notice.
Yeah, but I think it's not it's important from a status.
The player counts can't be that high.
Actual number.
Oh yeah.
Users,
yeah. But the thing is, like, I mean, what Microsoft don't want is that the UK block this, and then other people will follow suit. Yeah. Because remember, I think the UK in part also blocked the Nvidia Risk.
That's a completely separate thing. But they had plenty of opportunities to do that a long time ago. But the fact that they waited to the end is stupid. But that's a separate thing.
But what I'm kind of saying is it can be blocked.
But that's specifically a UK company. That's UK systemic. That's very different.
Yeah, totally. The Activision is a US company, when it's all said and done. But they need to operate multi kind of like markets. That's the reality of it. And they're gonna want that. They're gonna want to be active in every single market. That's the thing. It's a global brand. But I mean, we got to watch that space. I still think it's gonna go through.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a next year thing certainly. But I feel it's gonna go through.
The only way I could see it ever getting blocked is if the EU regulators step in because Blizzard have a strong presence in Europe and France, or the US. That's the only two places. I mean, otherwise it's going for.
It only takes one regulator, and
Yes.
the rest could like potentially tumble. That's the thing.
No, yeah, I mean, but I think it would only tumble because Microsoft say, well, the numbers don't stack up if we lose that region. But the UK doesn't have enough numbers
Well,
to stop
I don't think
this.
it will stop it,
They'll
but
go ahead with it.
it will complicate things. That's for sure.
Yeah, but then if it goes through, I mean, how a lot the UK might block it for a certain amount of time, but they'll eventually let it. They'll
Yeah.
put pressure.
I mean, we'll see. I mean, stranger things have happened. Obviously, I don't think obviously it's going to get stopped, but Nvidia not being able to acquire risk, and Nvidia are a extremely big and powerful company as well. Yeah, they're not small fry. So that for me was okay. That was surprising. So things can happen, and I think we're maybe counting our chickens. I still think it's going to happen, but there could be some bumps
Yeah.
in the road for them.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think there's still.
Honestly, Xbox, PlayStation having their dance off. So lots of bad optics for Sony, and obviously The Last of Us Part One, a remake, remaster, what you want to call it, it's a remake. Been out there for a long time, and I think really when it's all said and done, it's actually reviewed quite well. And based on what Digital Foundry kind of saw, they said there's a lot of work being put into this, no doubt about that. But still, bad
Yeah.
optics. Yeah, it's a £70 game, which is basically a remake.
I was just going to add that aren't Sony getting sued as well for exploiting
That was a
gamers?
ridiculous
There's
one,
another
though.
lawsuit that's been started.
It's totally ridiculous, and it's basically it's a bit of a sham, I think, because it's a UK based lawsuit as well, and I think they're talking about, was it that Sony have ripped off? Is it 9 million?
No, it was something. It was something. It was something pretty large, but it was like a ridiculous number, and it was just like,
Yeah,
Yeah,
what?
it's to do with the PSN store,
yeah,
is it
the
not, the prices?
70-30% split
Hmm.
that everybody in the world does.
It's
By
the same
way,
thing that's just been aired by
everybody.
Epic and Apple. It's
Epic,
like, come on.
Apple, Microsoft, everybody does this. Every single person.
It's probably Microsoft who's got that stuff.
Well, you
to
imagine
go.
if this was
Just the
one,
UK
right?
just
Who would be
counter-
next? Microsoft would be next. Yeah. But you know what? It's a bit of a sham because when I read about this, right, it's a specific law firm going after them. Whatever the number might be, let's just call it 9 million gamers. I'm pretty sure not one of those 9 million gamers basically asked this law firm to step in. It was the other
who are
way
they
around.
representing in this?
Yeah, I'm representing the so-called 9 million gamers. They don't even know I'm representing them.
Yeah, they don't know that they're being
Yeah.
ripped off.
Yeah, they don't know they're being ripped off, and like, they don't even know they need help. Yeah, and it was such a sham. I just thought to myself, this is just nonsense. Like, who is this person? Like, who is this person? Doing this. No gamers have literally kind of asked for this, I think. But again, it all counts about optics. Doesn't change, right? Doesn't change. But
I don't think they care. They don't care. The Sony just
yeah,
don't. They're
but
at
it's
that
such a
stage where they
sham,
just
though.
don't
It's
care.
a sham of a lawsuit. It's just
No, sorry. What I meant is like lawsuit or not. The whole list of optic stuff that you're going to take us through is from a position of Sony feel like they have so much influence and power and momentum with their brand, where they're heading with their film studios, with the sales of their PS5, that any bad news,
ain't that bad.
any lawsuit is not going to stop us. We're too.
Okay, what's the worst that's going to happen, right? Again, they might get fined, but that's assuming they even get anywhere near, actually landing. And then what, right? Are the regulators actually going to block them from the UK from selling any PlayStation, any Sony product? I don't know.
No.
It just seems so crazy that they're probably just like, who cares? We've probably got their own law team to go and look at it, and actually it'll keep them busy.
Yeah, and these companies are getting sued all the time. It's normal. But it's continued bad optics. You might be right. I mean, Sony might not care about this, but at some point they're going to have to.
Yeah.
PlayStation Premium, which is obviously their service. Um, that top tier continues to be pretty rubbish, much as I can see it. The essential and actual the extra tiers are actually quite good. Those seem to be looking looked after. But I can't help feeling, what is this premium tier actually about? It
Yeah.
needs to turn into something else, and maybe, Jay, to your point, when they do get the film and esports and all this other stuff off the ground, right, they can refactor some of this stuff and make the premium tier actually meaningful. We've talked about Xbox announcing COD will be on Game Pass and PlayStation day one, and we obviously know that right now PlayStation has had to raise prices in Europe, the APAC and the UK, with the US remaining as is, but the PlayStation price tag has gone up by, in the UK anyway, £30.
Told you how to get one.
You should have got one then, you lads.
You wait.
Still don't
You
need
waiting
one.
for what? You're waiting for a
Yeah.
price drop. It's going up.
It'll be
It's
on
going the other
sale
way.
at some point.
No, it won't. And that's the other thing. I don't think we're going to have any sales in
No,
this
I mean,
generation.
the consoles hardly go on for sale. They just bundle more. That's how much you get.
Yeah.
My personal opinion is, I don't think £30 is excessive based on what how the economy is looking, and also like I think Sony as a company, you know, they're yen based, so I don't know what the foreign exchange currency might look like.
The yen is
Yeah,
extremely weak, but it's not. The GBP is
yeah,
just as bad, really. But still, yen
yeah.
is still weaker.
But I've never seen a console kind of, well, not a Sony console, and it basically go up in price. Um, but you look at it, Meta, their headset has gone up $100. $100.
But that's in improved tech and quality, though, isn't it? Built into that price, not just. But then also again, the components are probably more complicated, so less volume. So the components are more unique and they sell less volume, and therefore it's in that higher price bracket. When you aggregate it up, it adds up to the £100 probably quite quickly. Yeah, it's like an expensive product, let's say cars. When it goes up a much. It seems like it goes up a much bigger factor.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe this stuff's tracking inflation. I don't know.
Well,
You have to see it as a percentage
Yeah,
of the actual cost, isn't it?
yeah, and don't forget it's the whole supply chain and
yeah,
everything else as well. I mean, the cause for the price increases, I think, is
yeah, yeah.
multiple factors.
Totally.
So not just
Economy,
necessarily one.
strength of the yen,
Um,
supply.
yeah, just going back on that Sony being sued, it was apparently for £5 billion, and it's against 9 million users. So the 9 million users scaled by £67 to 500 odd pounds each.
Which is not going to get.
No, this is
This
like,
is a
well,
total load of bollocks, basically.
hmm,
I mean, the real things, fair enough, but this doesn't feel real. It feels like somebody
Mm.
trying to make a name for themselves. That's how it feels to me. I mean, on the price hike, I mean, Microsoft have responded, or Xbox have responded saying they've got no plans to raise prices, and we should put yet in brackets, yeah, because Microsoft actually
hmm.
have raised the price of Xbox in India twice.
Right.
Yeah, it will depend on region to region and where it's being manufactured, right? So all your parts and stuff. So there's
Yeah,
definitely
definitely.
multiple factors involved in this.
Not so much. Well, bad optics for some people. Sony have acquired Savage for their mobile game division, and then obviously insisted that this won't impact their single player narrative games. So they're, obviously and they did that quite strongly actually.
The more I reflect on them, I mean, how many single player games do they actually
True,
have? They
true. But the thing is, it's going back to your rep and your optics and all of that sort of thing. I
Yeah.
mean, that's how they looked upon, and those single player games sell tens of millions. It's the rep they have with it.
Sony have made this mistake as a brand outside of gaming before, where they got too confident and cocky. And they're making the same mistake again here, I think.
I think I'm starting to believe that more and more.
I know they are, and I think the other thing is, I think Phil's the way they've restructured Microsoft and they've given Phil Spencer more power I think there's more longevity in the leadership there at Xbox who actually make the real decisions, which leads to them doing better decisions for gameplay and longer strategic things, versus Sony and their CEO is probably going to go disappear after 2 or 3 years or whatever, then just wants to make as much money as he can in the time that he's there, and probably cares a little bit less
Jim
about.
Ryan's a businessman, that's for sure. And it kind of feels that the people who were into gaming running PlayStation no longer there, no longer have any kind of
Yeah,
power. So, I'd say that's a fair assessment. But getting back to it, I mean, again, Sony have acquired Savage, the mobile gaming division, so they're obviously looking for it to expand, and it's all that sort of thing. And the only, I don't even call this a bright spot, but they took I think a 14% stake in From Software. Yeah, so that's the one bit of positive news about Sony, the last month, I think so. Not been a great month for them, that's for sure.
that last bit's not positive for
Oh yeah,
anybody
yeah,
apart from
that's that's
Sony,
that's
isn't
right.
it?
But I think again, we talked about how can Sony stop things coming onto Games Pass? They don't have to buy the studio.
Well, it sounds like, based on what Xbox response was, they're paying people. They're paying people to not actually put it onto Game
They got it.
Pass,
They got
which
it.
is, yeah.
Money's got to change hands, right?
This is where this is their first big mistake. Rather than leaning into it, because it's going to happen, they should whack all their first parties on there and just get on with it. Stop people even looking at the fence to the Game Pass. Get them invested properly
Yeah.
in their
Spend
ecosystem.
exactly, rather than spending money blocking the other way, fix your own problem.
Get the people hooked on your first party Gran Turismos, the games that were already out are coming, because you've got movies and all these other things are coming on, right? Get them even more hooked and glued in. The new generation of people that haven't played some of these old games, because some of these games came out a long time ago. Gran Turismo has been a while since I've had a good, decent game. Last of Us 2, okay, that's just come out recently, but like the Horizon, still a fairly new franchise. God of War's just been rebooted. You know, this only had one game, and they have more confidence than people. I think people give them too much praise, to be honest, for their first party games. They are good, but there's not enough volume of them. There's not enough to justify them doing the moves that they're making around holding it off from their premium tier and chucking them all in there and saying all their future games are going to be in there.
There's only one reason, or two reasons. One, they can't afford to, and number two, it's they don't want to move away from their business model. We looked at the whole why couldn't Sony do Game Pass thing, and when you look at even if you guess their numbers, right, there's no reason why they couldn't necessarily. But the reason is their profit margins. They laud their kind of first party. I mean, if you look at their financial reports, right, they actually line by line talk about their first party games, line by line.
Yeah, but they're gonna reach a point because the price differential's huge. If you're a gamer and you're paying Game Pass versus you just have to buy 3 Sony games, and that covers like a couple of years of 2 years of Game Pass almost 3 or 4 games.
Yeah,
Those decisions people are going to be forced into soon when Game Pass gets even more momentum, right? They got the games coming out in the next 6 months, and then there's the backlog of games they haven't released this year and
and maybe
into
that's
next
the other
year.
perspective as well.
It's gonna it's gonna be a hard wall that comes of people, and it's based on price, huge price differences. They're gonna be forced into this position, and they must know it, right? Now, Game Pass, Xbox now have in a position where they have so many game studios and invested so much in buying out these other companies with the studios that they probably won't make as much money, that much money from the Game Pass subscription. They have to increase the price. Sony have less franchises and arguably less cost to develop their brands that are synonymous with Sony. I think it's not the case that they are going to lose money by moving to a Game Pass model. Is they're going to make less money
That's
now
it.
if they did it.
That's exactly what I mean. Their profit margins are going to be less. They basically they've got massively invested in what
Yeah,
those
but they,
first party games are.
but there's the opportunity cost slightly more longer term right, let's take this example. They lost out to Xbox 360. It is hard work getting people back onto the PlayStation when the Xbox 360 was the thing. They've done it, right? If the people switch to Game Pass,
The harder
I
kind of,
think
yeah, harder switch around.
I think it's going to be harder
But
because they're
Jay,
not have the
you know
volume
what?
of games.
In terms of numbers, they actually didn't lose that Xbox 360 generation.
By
At the
by the
end, they sold more.
yeah, by the end they sold more, but they had to.
There's a fight.
They were the underdogs from until the end.
Yep. But you know, I'm not sure. I mean,
Xbox was a nobody
yeah, yeah, definitely,
until Xbox 360,
definitely.
and then they're still a somebody now,
Yeah,
aren't
I
they?
do
Still Xbox.
wonder if it's the point that Sony don't think that Game Pass has any legs on it, and I wonder if that's really down to part of their thinking. Why they want to retain the model they have because they don't think this has legs on it, and they're just trying to wait it out. Yeah, because there's lots of reason they
Yeah,
wouldn't do this, and obviously we've gone back the profit margin, how they basically lord over their first party, software and games. But then the other thing is, that, do they actually think that this has legs on it? That's the other question.
I see. I think the Microsoft have got the whole PC platform as well as Xbox. If Sony, there's rumours of it as well, bringing their PS Plus, having a PC version tier to their PS Plus. Eventually, they could go after the whole PC
Yeah,
market as well, couldn't they?
yeah. But I do think the people who have the PC platform are not actually Microsoft. It's Steam.
It's Steam, yeah.
Yeah,
No, but I'm saying, um, they've got. It's not just Xbox. They've got access to a subscriber base within the whole PC market.
true.
Yeah,
Very true. But that's where we're at. Xbox and PlayStation are dancing on. So let's see how this basically develops. I think we're in for a very interesting end of the year. Maybe Sony will show their hand. Who knows? Maybe they'll say nothing.
I think that
Yeah.
nothing. This is.
I think next year will be very
I,
telling.
I think my prediction is that we're going to walk into a much slow moving news cycle period for games until we have a huge shift in game models. Maybe movie franchises might revitalize things. I think it's going to be a bit of a it's almost like the winter's coming for gaming.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. I think things will just get into certain level of cadence. The other thing I do wonder is like if Sony are thinking game services and free to play and whatever they're gonna experiment with next, or is gonna basically be their saving grace. Because
Yeah,
quite honestly, if they had two big Genshin-like games out there, yeah, I don't think they'd even care. They wouldn't care
no,
about Game Pass because that would be making
yeah,
them far too much money. They wouldn't care,
yeah, yeah. I
and I think
agree. Yeah,
that's where they're. I was saying to Al, right? What they're trying to do now is that it's a battle for business models, yeah, and they want to retain their first-party AAA status in the games because that's important to them. But they're trying to supplement it with these other things, right? That make
yeah,
not going to Game Pass viable. Because really, Sony's end game and any company's end game is not whether they go to Game Pass or another service or any of that stuff. Are we making lots of money?
Yep.
And I don't care how they do
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But sorry, we can drag this conversation. What are they? I think people give too much weight to their first party games. You've got Gran Turismo, where the last one was a bit of a flop, really, and the new one isn't doing massively well. You've got Horizon Forbidden West, right? It's a good franchise, but I don't think it's got a huge mass market
Well,
appeal compared to other games.
think on this number. Horizon Zero Dawn sold 20 million.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, it's not
Okay.
small.
Oh,
See, none of these franchises
yeah,
are small.
Mm.
And
I'll take it back then.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
ironically, the franchise has sold in terms of numbers that I thought that's not a big number in comparison to other things, right? Was actually Uncharted, but arguably that's one of their best known
Yeah.
franchises. But that sold about 10 plus million.
You've seen other
Mm,
companies have strong franchises, the Call of
mm.
Duties, the and they sit on their laurels, and each franchise fades.
Yeah.
Right, right. I still don't see Sony's brands there. Those games are not 10-year franchises.
No,
You keep
they're
putting out
not,
games
because
for.
Sony are not the company who basically keep their franchises forevermore. Because if you look at the PlayStation 1, or more likely PlayStation 2 and 3 franchises, they flip over every generation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
they
That's
don't
because they're
retain
free
them. Yeah, if
to.
you think about what we used to play, Jack and Daxter,
Yeah,
Siphon Filter, um, what was that? What did on?
Twisted
Yeah,
Metal and
all gone, right? Um,
yeah,
you know, so I mean, Uncharted stuck around.
that's done now. I think
Yeah,
though.
that's kind of like come to an end, right? So they don't,
And I
they
think
roll
The
them over.
Last of Us
Yeah,
will have probably one more than they've done as well. I think
I'd be
probably.
surprised if we even had one more. I
Yeah.
think Naughty Dog. I mean, Naughty Dog. Was it Naughty Dog? Yeah, they're coming out with
Yeah.
the what is a live service version game of Last of
Yeah.
Last of Us.
That's
But that's it.
that's it.
That's
Yeah.
the end game in it. So I mean, they're not that company. That's why I really think, right, that they've got very little interest in following the Microsoft model, but they're looking for other ways to make money. And for me, it feels like live service games, because the type of investments they've made, I think that's got to be it. Well, anyway, guys, we talked at length. I think the PlayStation and Xbox stance off. Let's move on to the next topic. Okay, Al. The next topic I want to get into is really PC gaming hardware.
Hmm.
It looks like obviously we're going next gen.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is obviously around CPU and GPU.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for this podcast, I'm really going to focus on CPU.
Yeah.
Basically, both Intel and AMD have their CPUs out, reviewed, out in the open. I think the Intel one's not up for sale just yet
Mm.
at the time of recording, but obviously, the NDAs are done and the reviews
Yeah,
are out.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we'll get to GPUs for the next podcast. As of this time, AMD are yet to release their RDNA 3 cards.
Mm.
Intel have basically released Arc of Swords,
Mm-hmm.
and Nvidia obviously they've disclosed, and released what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's get into it. I mean, what did I say? It's it's like the CPU wars, right? And let's be honest, kind of AMD shot its load first. Excuse all these kind of like sexual innuendos I've got littered around all of my kind of like material. Well, let's talk about this. So AMD Ryzen 7000 series desktop CPUs. Okay, what do they give us? Well, the information is based on the high-end 7950X.
Mm.
It's Zen 4 architecture. They're basically introducing a new platform, AM5 socket, with commitment to support the socket until at least 2025. Those plans could change. Obviously, you might get more, you might get less, but so far AMD have been quite reliable.
Yep.
When it comes to platform support.
Yeah, they've been supporting AM4 for quite some time. I've got one. Yeah, it's been pretty good. So yeah, let's hope they do a good job with AM5 as well.
Indeed. They've got PCIe 5 support. They've got DDR5 support for memory, but no DDR4 support. So obviously not backwards compatible with the old flavor of memory.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They've got AVX 512 for AI, which is ironic because Intel have all but abandoned it for their desktop CPUs.
Mm-hmm.
And it works with AM4 CPU coolers. So there's there's a little bit of reuse there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And for the first time, as much as I can remember, they have integrated GPUs. 2-core. You're not really going to play AAA games on it, that's for sure. But it's there and it's useful for troubleshooting and the like. this particular GPU is be absolutely useless, for anything but maybe really ancient games and or kind of your kind of OS Windows.
Yeah, I'm just thinking browsing type stuff.
Yeah, that's
or even minimum browsing.
Yeah. But moving on from that, it looks like AMD still have performance per watt gains here, and interestingly, they've got this 65 watt eco mode. It's like a toggle. I think you can hit it through the BIOS, but they've also introduced it to Ryzen Master software, so you can do it via Windows. And it at 65 watts, it gives you better than 5950X and 12900K performance. Yeah, so there's some use there. There's some use there.
Yep.
There's some use cases definitely that might benefit from that. Now I've kind of like laid out a table of some of the specs, and obviously for anybody just listening to the podcast, they won't see the table. For anybody on YouTube, they'll probably see it in the video. They're pretty much stuck to their convention of between 16 to 6 cores, so not a lot has changed there. But if you observe it, I mean, they're basically boosting up to over 5 gigahertz, and you're talking the high 5 gigahertz, 5.7 for the 7950X, 5.6 7900X, and 5.4 and 5.3 for the 7700 and 7600. So they're getting very mighty close to what Intel are doing. They've got almost parity here, which is not something they've done in the past. Cache-wise, obviously, the usual AMD style cache increases. Yeah, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And for this generation, they're on TSMC's 5nm process node. Yeah, so they're getting benefits there.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you look at the power draw, also has gone up.
Yeah.
Also gone up. Now I left the Ryzen 5800X 3D there. Reason for that is it's still a viable gaming part right now. It's worth a comparison, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's still viable as a gaming part, that's for sure. And in certain titles, it matches the new generation in terms of AMD and Intel. Yeah, but obviously not for all workloads. It's nowhere near as good for, let's say, creation and real work kind of based kind of workloads. So what can you say about AMD's 7000 offering? Well, versus AMD Ryzen 5000, the previous gen, you're getting a 29% improvement in single thread performance and a 41% improvement in multi-threaded. Yeah, and it looks like most of the gains have been brought about by like a 13% IPC gain and much higher clock speeds. Moving on from that, obviously, AMD have fired first, but there are blanks here. They fired some blanks. There's no doubt about that. They're running with high temperatures, 95C. 95C, which is kind of scary, for anybody that's kind of like builds PCs.
I'm assuming those are the 7900s that are hitting that rather than the lower end one.
Yeah, I think pretty much the higher end CPUs are the hotter CPUs. That's for sure. But what it reminds me of conversations around PS5 when it kind of came out, and PS5 had this continuous boost. So its Ryzen CPU behaved a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And it had that set power level. Yeah. And that was a power level that the system would work at, and it would really balance that between CPU and GPU.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of confusion because obviously most of the time you run with a base clock and you boost out momentarily, and then you come down to your base. But in that situation, it was always, it was just hitting the boost as much as it could and maybe dropping off slightly. And the reality of that is they didn't lose much performance when they had to actually drop off slightly. Yeah, because the performance wasn't scaling linear. Yeah. Ultimately, this is the start of a new M5 platform, and it's expensive. That's the reality. It does not support DDR4 memory,
Yeah.
and currently, what I hear, it's not selling well. Why? Could be factors about the economy. Could be factors that the cheaper motherboards for AM5 are not yet out.
Mm-hmm.
Could be factors that people are just waiting for Intel to produce, their chips. And then also the other practical factors. If you upgraded within the last couple of years, unless you're the most, like die-hard enthusiast, you may not wish to upgrade. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've still got I'm still on the 3700X, and it works perfectly fine. Like, I don't see any good reason for me to upgrade, unless it's something really super duper that needs the kind of top end stuff. I just don't see a need to do an upgrade.
Yeah, that's the reality. I mean, I've still got my 3950X, and it does everything I need it to do. Yeah, it does everything you need it to do. Yeah. So really, AM5 feels like a bit of a bridge generation, to get themselves to that new platform.
Yeah, the first one in that new socket, and obviously then people testing the limits of that additional power draw and that kind of running in the higher temperatures, right? So yeah, like you're saying earlier, people do get uncomfortable when it gets that sort of high temperature.
Like you said, it no doubt pulls more power, than previous gens. But what people have observed is that it doesn't seem to throttle at these high temperatures. Yeah, and I think AMD are offering, obviously, their guarantees are based on that 95C spec. Yeah. And like I said, it's a different way of thinking about CPU behavior. That's the thing here.
It just means it's gaming as well as heating your home at the same time.
Yeah, but it's the reality is like I think a lot of people kind of worry about the the health of the kind of part more so than the heat of the room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's yeah. I mean, it is. It is. I mean, that's a high temp by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. But again, it feels like they're pushing it as hard as they can, right? And in past generations, anything that goes up to that level of temperature, the immediate thing you think it will throttle.
Yeah.
And that's your main concern. But this isn't doing that. I mean, I'm sure it throttles a little bit, but from what I've seen, from what I've been hearing, it's not at all significant. And this is why I think it's got shades of that whole PS5.
Yeah, the interesting thing is whether the motherboard manufacturers are also going to be, because there's standard sort of heat temperature alarms and stuff, whether they have pre-adjusted it to it as well, even with the new AM5 socket. So I'd imagine they would have done if they worked with AMD.
New chipsets, new BIOSes. All of those things you can actually set anyway.
Yeah, you can manually set, but the defaults. I mean, I've not touched my default alarms on my one.
Those defaults are pretty much set by the chip manufacturers and the motherboard manufacturers themselves. So it's not like a how would you call it, a global standard that everybody adheres to.
Yeah. It would have been subject to their own testing to prove out what scales they wanted.
Yeah, and people basically also do insane things with overclocking. With these parts, it's not as if it's kind of unheard of. It's just that for a standard consumer, right, and kind of like your standard enthusiast, 95Cs. Wow, what's going on here? And to be clear, this is a fast part. When we're talking about a 29% improvement in single threaded and a 41% improvement on multi-threaded, that's more than the last gen. Yeah. That's more than from 2000 to 3000.
Was it also
that's a massive jump?
Was it also for this one AMD lowered the prices of the ranges, or was it parity in terms of the how they do the 800s to 800s and stuff?
They seem to lower the price of the top end chip by $100.
Yeah, I think that's what I heard. So okay, cool.
Yeah, but everything else seemed to be parity with their previous gen. But it is a massive jump, in terms of performance. People kind of, I think they're clear, but they kind of like the aspects of temperature and expense and power draw sort of kind of overshadowed it.
Yeah, cool.
Now moving on to Intel. Well, Intel, that's a big gun. right? Obviously, Intel 13th Gen Raptor Lake desktop CPU. Now, again, this information is based on the high end 13900K. It's on the Intel 7 node, which is what we understand 10nm, or at least Intel's variant of it. Raptor Lake again is got a hybrid big and little core config with new Raptor Core P cores, but the same Gracemont E cores.
Mm-hmm.
So those E cores are the same, but they double those E cores, certainly for the highest end chip. And it's still on the LGA 1700 socket, which is now effectively, this is end of life after this. Yeah. So it's, it's a dead platform for all intents and purposes. It does support PCI E5 and DDR5 and DDR4 support. No AVX 512 for AI. And, as we know, there definitely will be kind of a KS part, and there are KF parts now.
Yeah.
Now, how does this look? How does this stack up? Well, if you look at the pricing, it feels cheaper than AMD. Yeah, right across the board. Now, they did kind of communicate certain recommended retail prices, but largely, I don't think you can get it for the recommended retail price. When I looked online and looked at the price range, you're talking about, I mean, certainly for the top end chip, they were saying $599, but really I've seen it between $629 and £699.
Yeah.
So effectively, the price of the price of AMD's top end. Likewise for the 13700K and the 13600K.
Yeah.
So yeah, the RRP's somewhat misleading. Core-wise, you can see they've gone with an 8P core, 16E core at the top end, 8 and 8 for the 13700K in the middle end, and 6 and 8 for the 13600K. But all that really shows us is that Intel have got some sort of a core count advantage now, even if it's in consistent size cores all the way across. And look, the max boost clocks are comparable, very comparable. Over each one of these guys is over 5 gig.
Yeah, but their core count is obviously the P and the E cores that's
combined. Yeah, definitely combined. They've upped the cache as well, so it's obviously that's helping with gaming. I've said the process node is Intel 7, but if you look at the power draw now, what they've Intel now split it between max power and base power. Yeah, the max power for the two top end chips, 13900K and 13700K, 253 watts. 253 watts, versus a TDP with 170 watts. I feel they draw more than that if allowed to.
Yeah.
But just to be clear. Now, I've left the 12900K there because I think it's, again, it's still very much a viable part, especially for gaming.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, it's retailing for £100 less than the new 13900K. Yeah. Now, what can I say about Intel's 13th Gen Raptor Lake? Well, compared to Intel's 12th Gen, 15% improvement in single-threaded, and that was already good. 41% improvement in multi-threaded, and the large gains seem to be brought about by certainly the clock speeds for single-threaded, and really for multi-threaded, the combination of the actual threads, cache, and clocks, that combination.
Yeah.
Now moving on, again, it's not kind of like plain sailing for Intel either, because people have basically measured a 300 watt power draw when all cores are engaged on the 13900K, and it's measured 100C in bursts.
So it's already breaching the max even even what the Intel is saying. So
Yeah, the max is, I don't know what you call it. It's not really a max, is it?
like an average max or something.
Yeah, something along those lines. But it gives you an indicator rather than an absolute. This is what it's going to do.
Yeah, like the TDP capped at that one. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's actually been measured to hit 100C. Yeah. Again, I said it had shades of this continuous boost that the PS5 used. Yeah, and obviously the platform that it's running on is end of life, LG A1700 end of life, and there's no upgrade path beyond 13th gen. Again, it could change, they could surprise us, but it's not likely. It doesn't seem to be the Intel way. You won't get the full performance uplift without DDR5.
Yeah.
Though in some stats and reviews I've seen, it might actually be marginal. Yeah, might actually be marginal, but there'll be some workloads in which obviously DDR5 will give you a clear advantage.
Yeah.
And obviously more power usage than previous gens, and there will be high temps, no doubt about that. Yeah. What else can we say about Intel's 13th gen? Well, even with these power levels and temps, it too does not really throttle. It does not throttle as we would normally think. If you know what I mean. And the other thing to say is that this is Intel's second successive good CPU launch. As much as I can see. What I mean is the CPUs look good. They're reviewing well. No doubt about that. So, Intel close to being back. For CPUs anyway. Now, what next? So, these CPU wars. I mean, it's a battle. It's not a complete war, right? But in summary, what we can see is Intel 13th Gen Raptor Lake wins performance, but it's really marginal in some cases. Like I've seen 5% differences for Intel, let's say 8% differences for AMD, more wins for Intel, I believe. They're trading blows.
Yeah.
Intel definitely wins at single threaded. I think approximately I've seen between 10 to 15% better than Ryzen 7000. But that's at the moment fairly normal for Intel and has been for many years.
Yeah.
Both are strong with multi-threaded. Intel 13th Gen is better with kind of lightly threaded workloads. AMD 7000 is better where workloads need a kind of uniform sized core. Where this big little thing doesn't quite do it. For instance, Blender and V-Ray. AMD Ryzen 7000 has an efficiency advantage. No doubt about that.
You mean efficiency of clock performance versus power draw and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's not a power draw. They're both kind of like, well, in saying that, I think the power draw of AMD is somewhat less in most scenarios. And I think I've heard that when you kind of limit the power, the performance of the AMD part is, I think, better than the comparable, Intel part at the same power level. But I haven't seen conclusive evidence of that. You can actually also say that, but obviously both AMD and Intel are pushing the limits for power, for performance. They're really pushing these parts hard this gen. So what's the why? And what I mean, why buy them? Well, 13th gen, and I've included obviously 13700K and 13600K. It's actually better value. You're getting a better price per thread ratio. You can't argue that. It's there. And 13th gen is arguably the quickest gaming CPU out there. But again, in some games it does look marginal, and it doesn't win everything, but it wins at most things. If you're on the existing LG 1700 socket, it's clearly far cheaper to upgrade to this. Drop it into your motherboard. No new motherboard. You can stick your DDR4 memory if you so wish, or get new DDR4 memory because it's still cheaper than DDR5. How about AMD Ryzen 7000 Zen 4? AMD is actually quite close in performance, and there are workloads where it actually just does make sense. aim for is it's kind of like future proof. So your outlay is going to be spread across a number of years for the motherboard and the memory and whatever else.
Yeah.
But the question you have to ask yourself is, are you really going to upgrade your CPU? Yeah, that's the question.
Yep. Yep.
And if efficiency is your thing, then AMD is still the king, and it has this eco mode, 65-watt eco mode. And I'm thinking it might be, something you can use for small form factor PCs. I mean, I've got one. I've got a mini ITX,
Mm-hmm.
and I dare not put Intel 13th Gen or an AMD Ryzen 7000 in it. Not at stock anyway.
Mm-hmm.
No way.
Yep. Yep.
The other thing that was interesting that has been proved is that changing or adjusting the IHS, the integrated kind of heat spreader, that lid, if you like, on top of the CPU, you can drop temps. I think the Bow dropped it by almost 20 degrees.
Mm.
But will AMD do that?
Mm-hmm.
There was some speculation that a lot of it was about getting it to be used with, let's say, the old AM4 coolers.
Mm-hmm.
That was part of the reason, but don't know. That's yet to be proven in terms of the why, but it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But the last thing I will say is that if you do game, and that's all you really want to do with this platform, why not just consider last gen? The Ryzen 5800X 3D still does a good job. Intel 12900K still does a good job.
Yeah.
And really, get yourself a new graphics card. That's the other thing.
Yeah, you're more likely to be capped on your GPU rather than your CPU.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Especially if you game at 4K.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're kind of like going 1440. Yeah. Because I mean there were some people who did actually attest with an RTX 4090.
Mm-hmm.
And arguably all the CPUs that we've just talked about deliver the same frames, yeah, but the same settings.
Mm-hmm.
It was no different, yeah, because obviously you got that 4090 there, and that was that. Really, it's going to be GPU bound.
Yep.
Let's move on. So, what could happen next? What's the next theatre war here? Well, Intel's 13th Gen Raptor Lake arguably comes in at a lower price for more performance. You can't really debate that. I think that's the reality, even if it is slightly marginal in certain circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
AMD's Ryzen 7000 arguably has far better efficiency. But is this a factor for most consumers? It may be one day, looking at the surging cost of energy and the way the economy looks. Both have comparable performance for single and multi-threaded workloads. And on paper, Intel has advantages for the core count, on paper. Clocks on IPC are getting closer, which was what traditionally was an Intel advantage.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that AMD does need to drop prices because it's just not comparable, really. I mean, if you just take our recommended retail price, it really isn't comparable, because you're getting less performance for more money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is the reality, and that's kind of been proven, really.
Mm.
And the other thing I would say, does AMD's 6-core 7600X actually make sense? Yeah, does it need this SKU? And should a 6-core part now replace maybe the 4-core budget CPUs? Because things have moved on. And if you're looking at it, Al, if you look at the prices, you can see.
Yeah, in terms of your top end. Yeah.
Yeah, and all of the Intel CPUs do outperform the AMD ones, even if it is marginal. Yeah, they trade blows, but it's but there are definite kind of performance advantages.
Yeah, it just kind of depends, right? Because I think the thing that's probably missing from these sorts of things is that you almost need to do like a bit of a weighted average on those cores, because you've got the P and the E cores in order to at least do some level of comparison based on clock speed. that's the sort of thing that probably someone needs to average out, at least for multi-threading. Obviously, for single core and sort of mostly for gaming, etc., then Intel definitely has the advantage. But at the cost of more power draw.
Yeah, I mean, the performance has been proven just by kind of running kind of benchmarks and applications for single multi-threaded. So, for that, it's fairly conclusive. Even if it's just like I said, in certain circumstances, kind of a little bit marginal.
Yeah.
But there's a clear winner here. So even though Intel does have, let's say, these E cores, I think they're better than what we think they are, and the P cores themselves pretty good. So it seems to balance out. Even putting that aside, from a pure marketing standpoint, the number of cores, you look at them right the way across the board. You see this. You see that the 3900K on a box has 24, and the Ryzen 7950X has 16.
Yep.
Or you look at the lowest end SKU, 6 cores.
Yep.
13600K, 14 cores.
Yeah, but again, this is because of the P and the E as well, though. But then the interesting thing there is that at that price point, it's probably fine for Intel's probably gonna push more of that in comparison to that of AMD's one.
It might be the case that it's down to the E cores L, but the 13600K has 6 P cores, 6 large cores. The Ryzen 7 7600X has 6 big cores. The difference is it gives you 8 E cores in addition.
Yep.
It's that addition. It comes in at maybe the Intel chip comes in at 30 pounds more expensive. From the testing I've seen, it gives you significantly more. That's the thing for the money.
I can imagine. I would imagine the Intel chip is much stronger at that kind of the more mid range within there.
Yeah, it's one across the board now. Yeah, there's not one SKU where it's had good wins. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
And ultimately that's what I think. AMD probably should look at this for the next gen. I mean, I think they will. I think that this is the best thing that could actually happen. For CPUs, that Intel have been able to produce this. And I think it will shift AMD out of this comfort zone because they've had this SKU for. This is the 3rd generation. They've had these number of cores. They haven't changed them.
And now that Intel are chasing them, at least actually probably beating them in quite a few different bits, then like you say, they won't be as comfortable as they used to.
Yeah, I mean they're winning more than they're losing, Intel. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yep.
What might they want to do in the immediate future? Well, I've thought that maybe AMD need to adjust the SKUs they're offering with a price reduction.
Yeah.
So I kind of drew up a little kind of table here and just kind of put my thoughts down. It's obviously completely fictional, but with the 7950X, obviously that continues to basically go up against the 13900K. But it really does need a massive, price drop. Not maybe quite by 100, but something like 70 kind of like pounds when we go on this.
Well, I mean, to be honest, the retail price that's out there, depending on demand, you're going to quite easily find things out there that's probably got on a discounted rate that the retailers can sell at anyway. So it might end up being that whilst we've been through that period of things have been much more expensive than the retail price, maybe we're going back to that the lack of that demand. And then supply is outstripping that of demand. So maybe you'll get those discounts, and actually the retail price is still just an indicator, and maybe that will skew it already.
Yeah, I think AMD do need to give that indicator though, because retailers will kind of mark down in and around that.
Yeah.
And that's the first number. Anybody that searches information about these chips will see mostly.
Yep.
even the Ryzen 7900X, I just felt that can't be a Ryzen 9 anymore, surely. Right, surely that has to be going up against something like the 1300K. 13700K.
Yeah.
And getting a price drop to be a bit more competitive with it. And 7700X is a Ryzen 5, and have that take on the 13600K really.
Yep.
Give it a bit of a price drop, and basically get that competing with the 13600K.
Yep.
I mean, the 13600K ironically will still have a core count advantage, but with eight big cores versus six big cores, and plus the 8 cores, it seems to be a fairer fight. If you know what I mean.
I mean, maybe AMD is just taking the tack and saying, let's just, this gen, we're not going to fight them as hard. And to be honest, with a global recession, maybe that's fine for now. They'll sell significantly less if they're not competing on price. But maybe they're okay. Maybe they're going to draw their attention to something else.
I don't think they're thinking like that at all, Al. I think they basically thought they did enough.
Well, if they're the first ones to also put the information out there, then yeah, Intel could have strategized behind them to undercut them.
Maybe, but the fact that they've not tried to increase core count and priced some of these parts as much as they have, maybe not on the higher end, but on the lower end,
Yeah.
makes you wonder, are they getting complacent? Recently, I think AMD's market capitalization actually outstrips Intel's.
It would have done, I think. I think it would have, because Intel was struggling that hard, and
Yeah.
AMD had that momentum. So
Yeah. And 5 years ago, AMD was a company that seemingly were going out of business.
Indeed.
So if you think about it from that perspective, you kind of wonder what's going on here. Are they getting complacent? And
Are they becoming
Intel-
the Intel?
yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we always said like it doesn't take a lot, does it? These companies are all the same, and you want Intel to give them a boot up the arse, and vice versa, obviously.
Yeah.
Because that just drives up kind of innovation in the like.
Yep.
But look, the future's bright. I mean, for all the kind of negativity we've touched upon, there's a lot of positivity. These are outstanding pieces of kind of silicon. They really are really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously it comes at a cost, comes with a kind of a specific kind of like power draw. No doubt about that. But things are marching ahead, and on the slide we're looking at right now, I kind of posted kind of some roadmap information for both Intel and AMD. I think we pretty much know in 2023 AMD has X3D variants of the 7000 series. And I will be honest with you, I would expect them, based off of that, to take back the gaming crown quite comprehensively. I think it's all about between 15 to 30% increase just by putting 3D cache on the 5800X 3D, and obviously wasn't good for all workloads, but certain stuff, gaming, there was a few niche workloads, creativity based workloads that it kind of worked well with. I'm expecting that to make waves. And the last time around, that's their first generation with Vcache. This time, a generation of maturity. Quite interested to see what happens. But will they release just the one SKU again, or will they release multiple SKUs? I'm hoping that this heightened competition that Intel has provided them will mean they will release multiple SKUs and provide some discounts, on the existing SKUs they have. In 2023, I think they're also looking to release Zen 4C. But what is it? I think C means compute or cloud. But the reality is it's about packing as many cores into a specific space, and I think it's all designed for kind of cloud-based computing, much as I understand it. But my thought process was, could this be their answer to like Intel's equals if they really wanted it? Yeah. I think it's. I strongly believe it's for the data center. You know, it's for like really dense computing clusters for like cloud computing and the like. So they can pack in more in a kind of like smaller space. But also a possibility. In 2023, 2024, Intel has Meteor Lake and Arrow Lake. And I think we can expect an increase in core count from these guys. Yeah. In 2023, 2024, AMD has Zen 5 with X3D variants and Zen 5C. And this is all kind of known stuff. I mean, this is on their roadmap. So it's looking pretty interesting in the rate of innovation and kind of progress, steamrolling ahead. But I kind of thought about all of this stuff and I thought, well, a fictional outline of how Meteor Lake and Zen 5 core layout could look. I kind of provided a little table and I thought to myself, 4900K. What if that was 32 cores? 16 big, 16 small. 14700K. 8 big, 16 small. 14600K. 16 cores, 8 big, 8 small. I'm just wondering, I mean, Intel, what they did this time, they doubled some of the E-cores on some of their SKUs. Not all of them, but some of them. And then I thought to myself, well, what would Ryzen or AMD have to do? So let's say this fictional 8950X Zen 5 chip, and it might even be called the 9950X for all I know, because they have this weird naming convention of laptops. What if that was 32 big cores? We know they were well capable of such a thing. They got Threadrippers with 64 cores, for God's sake. That's not even out on Zen 3. I think it's still Zen 2 or something like that. I can't even remember now.
But who needs it?
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, if it's turning into an arms race, it's not about who needs it. That's the thing. It's like, I've got it. And if you're doing it, I'm doing it. But you imagine an 8900X with 16 cores, and that would be a Ryzen 7, and then a Ryzen 5, 8700X with 12 cores.
Yep.
But that's going on the basis that Intel are not going to basically double more of their kind of E-cores. Because you imagine that it was 16 big cores plus 32 E-cores. What would happen then? AMD have been long rumored to be working on this, it's called SMT4, which is, it's still a variant on simultaneous multi-threading. Obviously now it's 2 threads, but they've apparently been working on something that gives you 4 threads per core. Yeah. Or what if they did decide to use something like Zen 5C, like an E-core, as a cheap way of getting you kind of more cores?
Yeah, they're probably going to do it just to have a bit of an experiment, because just in case it actually does work, and how should I say, productivity and other things, or gaming, can take advantage of both the P's and the E's, in a similar fashion. And if the software is able to take advantage of it, AMD needs an answer.
I mean, the one thing I would say is that haven't Intel proved that it already works? You know what I mean? The kind of philosophy around it works, and AMD could stay being the big core company, because they might say, look, okay, listen, what we'll do is offer you 32 big cores.
Yep.
Or supplement your system with 8 small cores for certain workloads.
Yep.
Yeah, they could do that.
Yep.
I am kind of saying it. It could develop into an arms race, because that number is that was AMD's number for a long time. Now it's Intel's number, and whatever you say about P or E cores, is still a number. No one's gonna put a weighting on that box. Yeah, no one. But I did think the other thing that AMD could do would be to offer 3D Vcache day one. Just offer it day one.
if they've proven that is going to work, and the cost increase doesn't skew it too much, so that they're not as competitive with the existing Intel kind of chips.
I think it's expensive.
That's the thing. So if it's expensive, then maybe not. And then the question becomes, what's the reason to have it? If it significantly boosts gaming, if it significantly boosts other kind of workloads, then there's a reason for people to have it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it will largely depend on AMD's margins.
Mm-hmm.
They were first to the mainstream with kind of chiplet technology. It has to help with their yields.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and 3D Vcache. Actually, I just got to stop calling it 3D. I mean, like Vcache, right? Should be a maturing technology. This is the second generation we'll see it.
Mm-hmm.
So the reality is, does that mean maturity means kind of reduced overhead in implementing the thing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But looking at the roadmap, it seems they're hell bent on offering a variant of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, Intel usually produce their KS products, which is, you know, something with a better bin chip with a higher clock count.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think really maybe that's their way of thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's super interesting, Al. It's super interesting. I mean, I won't get any of these chips. Don't get me wrong. I'm quite happy with what I have.
Yep.
And I see no reason to change.
Yeah.
But I've got to admit, Zen 5 and Zen 6, I'm gonna struggle not to.
Yeah, I think I'm similar. I think we're both on that same that same generation, right? Because I think we were probably talking a lot when we were buying the 3000 series. So yeah, I can imagine us having a look at that again, and with a lot of interest to see if it's the right time to go in.
Yeah, and then, you know, admittedly, it might not even be an AMD chip at this rate.
True.
We just need to kind of watch what's going on here, because
Indeed.
it's Intel, as far as CPUs are going, seem to be going great guns. I mean, GPU wise, yeah, maybe less so, you know, because that doesn't look too good. But CPU wise, yeah, second successful launch.
And maybe we'll get an Intel graphics chip.
I'm not sure you're gonna get a good one. If I'm being honest with you, I mean, the chip might be good, but the drivers are probably gonna be crap. So I'm not sure I'm gonna be buying one of them for the next 5 years. If I'm being honest with you. But that's just me talking. You know what I mean? Like, you know, they're a big company with lots of smart people. I mean, they could turn it around in a matter of years.
Or will we see Nvidia CPUs?
Possible. But again, pretty unlikely. But certainly unlikely for the consumer market and enthusiast market.
Yeah.
More likely for maybe kind of you know, a data center and the like. You know, that's what I'm thinking. Now, look, with all that said, I mean, gotta say, I'm super excited for this, you know, this new generation of CPUs. Just basically because of what it represents, really. I mean, it just represents, you know, two companies in this specific area who are right on their, you know, it feels like they're on their A game, right? I mean, certainly there's been a lot of things that, okay, haven't sat too well. The power draw, the temperatures, yeah. Generally, the expense, yeah. Especially in the AMD's case, it's expensive, but it's a new platform.
Yeah.
You're buying into a new platform, so that much I can understand. But really, with that competition, there's a bit of parity here at the moment. I can only imagine they're going to push each other on. And I actually thought for a long time that if Intel wasn't going to do anything, AMD would have basically sat on the existing core counts.
Yep.
And we would have been in a situation very much like what happened with the whole Intel 4-core situation, where we sat on 4 cores for a god-awful long time. But I generally don't think AMD can do that now. And even if we say that Intel are cheating, yeah, whatever that means, I've got no idea what that means, because like the proof is in the benchmarks that people run for these applications, and the benchmarks are telling you it's kind of working. It's just getting you performance. I mean, who cares about whether it's a P or an E? Right, the fact is, look, are you getting performance? That's the outcome. You should be focused on the outcome. We're getting that, and I'm just thinking, well, if AMD aren't the company who want to kind of do the E cores or the smaller cores, then they're gonna have to push up the core count.
Yeah, they
They're
will.
gonna have to push it up.
Yep. Yep.
So it's all interesting times for us, that's for sure. Okay, Al, have you got any closing thoughts on all of this?
No, it's again, it's good to see this stuff, and again, another good generation of performance increases. I think again, like you say, they're both Intel and AMD are on their A game, and let's hope it continues.
Indeed. Okay, and with that said, let's move on to the next topic. All right, guys, the next topic I really want to talk about is really how the economy might affect gaming and what we pay for gaming and the value of gaming. And really, we know right now that PlayStation 5 is facing price rises. It's gone up around about £30 in Europe, APAC, UK, with the US staying the same. Xbox did respond and say they got no plans to raise prices.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest, they've also raised prices twice in India. Obviously, not set in stone. No, and I just wondered really if this is largely, driven by, FX weaknesses of the yen versus other currencies. As far as Sony is concerned,
it'd be the dollar. It has to be the dollar.
Yeah, we've seen Meta also raise their headset by $100. And I'm just wondering, what's this going to mean for new products? PSVR 2, which we kind of hoped would kind of roll in between, I would say, £300 to £500 to make it kind of acceptable or palatable to gamers in general. And the other thing is, everybody's complaining about the £70 game. But are we set for another increase? I mean, that's the thing. Are we set for another increase? So, guys, I just wanted to get your views on this. Really, I mean, it's a bit of a dry topic as far as gaming is concerned, but you know what? It impacts everybody, doesn't it? And the way the economy looks, I just thought, let's talk about this. Hey,
I think
let's talk about it.
it's actually more important than we probably realise, because if you see the undertone in the whole gaming industry moving to games as a service subscription models, and off the back of that already shifting to all the studio acquisitions, plus there has been a speed up in a recession, which everyone knew was happening, and then inflation. I think that whole storm together spinning around is fundamentally going to change gaming forever. So I think this is a great topic to discuss. I think it's fundamentally going to change things to the level of the game design. Games have inherently been more and more expensive to build anyway. Rather than taking a 2-3 year cycle, taking 5. Companies already trying to get MVP games out there and building out, proving the game works in a version 0.1. Take Grounded as an example. That's been out for 2 years now. Only version 1.0 just come out now, and it's flourished as a game from day one because they've built it up from, been transparent of what the game is and built it around what the community want before they've mass marketed it. So I think it's going to be the headline for me is it's going to be short-term pain with increases in prices because from inflation. I think there will be pain in terms of game prices going up in the short term, next 2-3 years. But fundamentally, it won't matter as much for the gamer when they're going to be playing against a subscription model anyway, within the next 3 to 5 years anyway.
Yeah, I kind of do wonder if it hastens us towards this games as a platform, games as a service model, because it's for the companies who are investing the millions upon millions of pounds in developing games, they want something that's sustainable as well. less risk and all of that sort of stuff. And
Gamers like it. If you find a game that you fundamentally like, you want more content to come out of it, rather than have, because
correct.
sometimes it's painful as a gamer when you get promises of a sequel and it's not quite a sequel, and then they've tried to reinvent themselves and it's not quite, and it loses its way, and it's painful as a gamer for your
Yeah,
for
you
the
have to relearn a whole game mechanics and then all that sort of stuff as well. It's an investment. It's an investment of time, right?
yeah,
So
that's right, that's
Yeah.
right, yeah.
I think people forget that, right? That playing a game well is an absolute time investment.
Hmm.
The mechanics, the feel, the muscle memory, you know, all of that sort of thing. That's another investment.
And how many sequel games flop? They put a number 2 or 3 on it, and it just, as a gamer, you're
Yeah.
frustrated. Like, why do this? It's almost like the developers, in order to meet the requirements of the studio that's funding them, to meet the requirements of the shareholder, have to add quotation new features to justify the next number on it. Then therefore experiment with something they shouldn't, and then they go in a complete direction and break the game.
or some of them don't even meet the same features as they were even doing from the previous version. Just yeah, there's some crazy things that kind of go out there.
Yeah, what this theme now it's like the work from home, which was going to happen over the next 10, 15 years anyway, and COVID sped it up.
Hmm.
What's was going to happen in gaming, I think, will get sped up with a recession, inflation now.
Yeah, because don't forget, I guess gaming, with cost of living, inflation kind of going up everywhere. Games and other things is a luxury. It's like an additional thing, right? And all the services, subscription models, some of those they'll have to cut back on too. So it will affect the industry, and offsetting that with price rises, it just means that it gets there's less accessibility to it, right? All these VR headsets and Meta, people just won't be able to afford it. You need stuff behind it to actually make this work. So they just can't afford it. And some of the free to play games will probably be okay. Maybe it's fine, but even then, time, electricity. There's electricity involved in you even playing games, right? And people are complaining about that too. So there's multiple folds of problems here, and I think it just means that they're going to have less gamers.
I mean, psychologically as well, I think games as a service, microtransactions. I know everybody hates them. I know that everybody hates them. Can't stand the thing, But the reality is, when you look at the amount of a microtransaction versus £70 for a game, it's a little bit more kind of acceptable, and you kind of you fine forget it.
Yeah, it depends on how much time, right? So this is where it's interesting. I've been obviously out of the three of us, I've been playing the most out of these these free to play games, and I've been spending some money, but not let's call it the £70 that you kind of said there. I mean, how many hours can you get out of a AAA title for £70 versus probably the amount of time I'm playing on a free to play game? Admittedly, I am spending the odd bit on some microtransactions here and there, but I'm probably not spending that 70.
Yeah, or you spend less of it. Has to be an amazing game for you to spend that, or you wait for it to go on sale. And I think I'm pretty much in that mold now where I'm, unless it's just an amazing thing, I've just got no motivation to spend that amount of money.
Yep.
Because I never get to it quickly enough. There's no point. I just don't get to it quickly enough. I just stockpile these things.
So to actually answer some of these things, there's a shift in gaming type between generations, right? Like we like more single player games, and are more used to paying the £60-70. But if you're a youngster now in your 20s or younger, paying £60-70 for a game is you don't want to do it when there's so many free to play games that you've got used to. So the writing's on the wall for Sony, right? Microsoft have already gone to first party games, Game Pass. That's the future. Sony, we already had the discussion on a previous podcast, are holding on to the single player first party games 60-70. I think that's going to quickly disappear. the other part of the conversation is the hardware. I think in the next 2-3 years, the price is going to keep going up, and I'd be surprised even in these console generations now with the PS5 or the Xbox Series X, whether we'll get a you know, when they come out with a slim version with cheaper parts, but they also reduce the price. I don't think we're going to get that sort of stuff happening anymore, or certainly not in this generation. One,
Yeah,
because of inflation, but also because mobile phone prices have driven everything up. I think they can almost get away with it with the consoles because they're so cheap for what they are.
well, they're probably still loss leaders, right? So I think even back in a few generations ago, they were making losses on these things, but they want to sell you the additional services around it, right? So I don't know if they're doing that on the PlayStation 5. I'd imagine they are, and they were forced to do the price rise because of the yen dollar difference.
Yeah, I think right now, from the era PS4 through to PS5, they're getting closer to breaking even. They're less of a loss lead, yeah, or they get to profitability for the hardware a lot quicker than they used to. And plus, right, we're talking about what is less exotic hardware. I mean, it's x86. It's
PC,
GPU
basically.
that's out there. Yeah, GPUs that are out there. So there's less of that. The R&D is still there, but the R&D is in partnership with a company like AMD. So there's really less of that. But just touching a point Jay made about Sony and obviously Microsoft. See, I think Sony will probably to some degree maintain this big £70 blockbuster sort of thing. But I think what they're going to do is double down on services as a game because they've got 10 of them in development anyway, right?
I think there will. The single player games, how long are they? 12 hours, 15 hours,
15
20 at a
hours,
push?
yeah, 15 hours.
We, as old fogies, right, have already got such a big back catalogue, but even if we really loved a franchise or game, are reluctant to spend 60, £70, and you would say that we're at an age where we can afford to spend that kind of money in a game, and we're
Yeah,
reluctant to do
well,
it. How long can they Sony realistically do that?
yeah. But when I mean double down, I just believe, right, that over time, given the state of affairs, that their main income source for games is going to come from services, platforms, as
Yeah, okay. So
game.
you are saying they are going to actually
They'll shift the
double.
weight, yeah.
Yeah,
and I think they're reluctant to do the whole subscription thing, like a Game Pass, because I just think, a subscription's a subscription. Whether you subscribe to a service that gives you, like access to hundreds or thousands of games, or whether you a subscription, or what is microtransaction model to get you access, to one game, yeah, they're still making money, and I think that's what they prefer. And over time, I mean, listen, we all know Sony don't really make that many kind of, let's say, single player games anyway in the grand scheme of things.
they don't. Yeah, but
Yeah, they can afford to keep maybe certain franchises going that their main franchises, and maybe for those things they'll kind of follow this kind of like a cross media approach where there's a film, there's a TV show, then there's your game, and they can get away with stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah,
But their main cash cow, their perpetual, let's say, reliable means of getting regular income in cash flow is going to be through some sort of live service game. And they just need a few of those guys to hit home. Yeah.
Yeah, just
And
depends
they
on
are
which one.
winning, man. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
don't need Game Pass necessarily. That will be kind of Microsoft's and Xbox's model. But the one thing about Game Pass is that you need games.
yeah.
That would be the only thing that I would say, that's interesting.
We're going off slightly off topic a little bit, but I think that's the reason why they've obviously bought Blizzard, because they probably have low confidence on converting their games to fill that games as a service model to support their Game Pass. But coming back to the economies of scale, if you look at the constraint in the supply chain and people going nuts and paying for cars and paying 10%, 15% over list price, it can be even 20% or 30% for luxury cars like a Porsche. I kind of see, that with all the hardware and the price increases, even if they bumped it up another 50 quid, I think they can get away with it. People like this, they can't produce enough. They're going off the shelf so quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think demand's down. I'm sure I can get a PS5 if I want to now, but I'm not. I'm still not.
You can't, because I asked when I went
Really?
to get Smith's Game Store. They're just still not. You can't get them. It is getting easier, as in I think Sony are doing now. It would depend on what country, but I think the UK, or it might be in the US, right? I heard that you can get in a queuing system to get it direct from Sony versus any ballot type prize draw type ticket.
I've definitely seen it much more available because there's been a few opportunities where I could have gone, and I'm like, nah, I wasn't. There still wasn't anything that was grabbing me enough to go and get it. Even with the announcement of the PSVR 2.
I think I read some article or saw some headline saying they've got 400% more stock. But when when you've been denied drinking water for such a long time and you've been walking that desert, that drinking water is going to disappear rapidly.
Yeah.
So.
Well, wait till come in. Like you still, even though they've increased the supply, I think there's enough demand that they're still flying off the shelves. Come Christmas, it's gonna extend out into next year. I think mid next year, I think will be. You can walk into a store and you'll see one.
I don't think things will be the same way as they were.
You think so?
Yeah, I don't actually. I mean, because AMD and people like Intel, they've been making noises about shortages, and that sort of thing. So, I just think when you have a big machine like this, kind of, I mean, and the machine isn't just Sony or Microsoft. It's just kind of this whole kind of ecosystem, multitude of companies doing different things for each other. And when that slows down, it kind of takes a long time for that to kind of like, for you. It's like cranking the motor on one of those old kind of like cars where you kind of turn the handle before it kind of like.
Yeah.
I see things improving next year. I just don't think it will be the same.
No, stock's not a problem. If I want to get one right now, so the digital one that I can't get, I can get the normal one. There's loads, like Game Shop 2. I can see loads of them already right now.
Oh, they're there. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing angle on this is that it's not only that we've got them in shops, physically in shops, right? You need to produce the kind of technology in chips, and all of these things get manufactured separately. There's not one Sony or let's say Microsoft factory that basically just churns out everything that is in an Xbox or PlayStation. Yeah. So I mean, I hear rumors of Sony and Microsoft producing, there's slimmed down versions. There's the chips, right, to make it easier to produce. And then I also hear that there was a rumor that Sony were producing something with a detachable Blu-ray player or something. But to me, that just speaks to we got to find a way to manufacture these things a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Well. Plus, there's also a political environment as well. Isn't the US trying to like sort out doing chips themselves in the US rather than being reliant on China and Taiwan?
Yeah, I think it's more of a play because I think they're kind of worried about the whole Taiwanese and Chinese situation. So it's not that they're not worried about Taiwan per se, but they kind of worried about what might happen to Taiwan. For a country like the US, which actually has technology leadership, part of the kind of power of that country is because they're the leaders of technology. Yeah, for them not to be producing their own chips, I mean, come on. I mean, that's a no-brainer, surely. I mean, come on. You can't be the leader, in technology, not produce your own, not fabricate your own chips or anything like that. That's just absolutely ridiculous.
They got the IP and the ideas, and that's it. And then you just get someone else to
Yeah.
print it for them.
Yeah, but when someone else does it, they've got you over a barrel, haven't they? So we've kind of like spun off onto all different sorts of facets of conversation. But when it's all said and done, these decisions will be largely driven by how the economy looks. Whether prices go up, inflationary kind of like factors, all sorts of things are, like that, supply, demand, whatever it is. Whether we follow specific models for people to consume the games, the economies dictate how much companies can spend on developing a game, because games are already expensive. And these are all factors, and the habits of gamers as well, largely driven to that disposable income we have. And if one day, right, I find out, paying even £50 for a game, because that's not a small amount of money in the grand scheme of things, is it? Like, it's £50 for a game that I might not pay for 2 years, right? I might say no to that. I might just say, look, give me Warframe. I'm not going to pay £50 for that.
Joe, here's a thought for you. We're going back to arcades. Are we getting the latest stuff in arcades? Because consoles were off the back of arcades being too expensive, and you can play as to your heart's content at home. Are we moving back?
That's an interesting thought, Al, and you hold that thought, right? But I think gaming's too much of a social, online social at least, even living room activity for us to necessarily go back to that model.
There's no way. Like Tekken, was like they used to release their games as their MVP for the arcade. They said they're not doing that anymore. I mean, there's no way. There's no way.
Yeah, there's no way. I don't think so. But the arcade itself might evolve into something else. That's the other thing. It doesn't nothing necessarily stays the same. And that basically segues nicely onto my next point. Given the economic backdrop and what it's doing for companies, gamers, prices, models, consumer electronics, and like, there's this little thing from my kind of a childhood, game stores. And I thought to myself, like, at the end of this, God, I used to love game stores. I used to love walking in there and being saturated by
boxes,
gaming, boxes and gaming, and
But when was the last time you ever was in there? I honestly can't remember now.
That's
I
because
think I probably went in there to buy a Christmas present, maybe.
Yeah,
but there are none left.
Yeah, but you because I've got young kids now. I go into Smith Toy Store, and they still have a gaming section there, kind of like a mini game store, and it's still nice to see the boxes there. You get attracted to games that you kind of dismiss by just seeing the icon on the internet versus the box being physically. You want to turn it around, and there's something nice about that. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's gonna die.
Yeah.
But the point it's dead. Yeah. The point I was going to make is that still don't underestimate how many people buy gifts for their kids who just aren't interested in gaming and don't know much and still want to go into a store. Hence why they always like. If you want to get a PS5 quickly, because I had a look on Amazon, and if Amazon don't really have any stock, you have to request. They've got some game bundles, but they're sold by third parties. They're expensive. You have to buy £600-700 bundle on game, right? But if you go to the physical store of Smiths, you're more likely to get a console. Because the game manufacturers they still sell a high volume of people rocking into a store like that, and I don't think that'll go away. But sorry, just this little segue. I don't know, I don't know if you guys used to go to like cafes where you could play online games, like because they used to have like high-end PCs. You play Counter-Strike or you play Medal of Honor. They were fun as well.
Yeah, the problem is that it never really took off in the UK because it's just too expensive. Like obviously South Korea and other countries, that was like almost bread and butter to quite a few of the kind of processors over there. But here, it was just too expensive. And
I used
actually,
to pay a
it probably
pound
just
an
wasn't
hour.
well
I used to pay a pound an hour when I used to go.
maintained.
I think the model would need to be different now. But I mean, and the the whole game store thing. I mean, look, I'm not talking about game or GameStop. I mean, those kind of soulless, kind of like wall to wall of like boxy game stores, whatever you want to call them. But specialists. Because I remember back in the day.
Independent ones?
Yeah, my God, there were some good independent ones.
I had a really good one in Yorkshire. That was awesome. I used to go there all the time.
Yeah.
So but then we used to, it was one of those ones where you get your that was the place where you trade in your games and secondhand games.
Yeah,
and they were much better priced than your local game or anything else. So they were actually closer to it, and that was really good actually.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that model is not a profitable model, and you can't have many people doing it because it just doesn't. The market's not there for it. But I would really love it to evolve into something. To Jay's point, like these high-end PC gaming, venues, what they gave you at the time was something that you couldn't have at home. Because like not everybody can pay $2,000 for a PC. I kind of would love to see venues that just focus a little bit more on that. This is what you can't have at home. It's either some sort of VR setup. It's either some sort of I don't know, LAN party environment with a coffee shop that could make their money on it.
Tournaments, local tournaments.
Totally.
I would totally go to that.
They had some of those in London actually. I'll send you the link.
Yeah, and by all means, sell food, sell alcohol.
They do.
You have to.
It's literally like a pub venue.
Yeah,
they have it all. In London, they have it.
Maybe that could be our new business venture, which is like create a franchise, which is like a gaming cafe social thing.
Yeah, I mean, but you'd have to offer people something that they couldn't have at home. That's the thing.
Like hardcore drugs or something like that.
Yeah.
And, in the back room.
The gaming would be the drug. In the back room, have some sort of like gaming shop, or a museum or whatever it would be, but something you could have for venues. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Something along those lines. In the more it goes on, obviously, because the young will get old. Who knows? You could offer a corporate event.
So I reckon that you could, if you did a mix of really massively off piece, but if you did a mix of we're going to watch this new trailer or this Microsoft or PlayStation conference as a collective, a new game comes out, you can watch someone play it, or let's have a tournament, or let's all just play an old LAN party game or something, or let's have
esports spectator, be something along those lines, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Have a large VR venue where you could walk around in, because there are kind of like experiences like that, that
I
sort
don't
of
know.
thing.
I mean, we're probably past post-COVID, but swapping headsets might not have been too.
It'll come back. Yeah, I mean, obviously, that whole kind of like hygiene thing is a bit difficult. But look, I just think, out of the old, in with the new. Look, with that said, I think we should kind of wrap up this topic. So, obviously, the economies have failed. The economy's in dire straits now, globally, no doubt about that. And it will impact gaming. We will see gamers' habits to potentially change. We will see the people who sell us these gaming experiences and the associated hardware, their habits will change. And, we better get ready for that.
Change is good.
Change is good, exactly. But I'd like to think with all the change happening, there's still a place for the good old game stall. Yeah, but definitely not
to the moon. To the
moon. Potentially. Something new, something borrowed. Who knows? But I mean, it's a nice thought, that we might be able to get something, back close to resembling something that used to make us feel good when we kind of like started off gaming. Okay, with that said, let's move on to the next topic. Okay, guys, it's come to that time of the night where we've got to say goodbyes. And I'm going to ask you our regular question. What have you been doing in the tech and gaming space? So I'm going to start with Jay. I'm going to start with you.
Cool. So I've been fully burnt out on Destiny. I've told my raid group I need some time out and probably some therapy of playing the same stuff again. But yeah, that it's for the gap. I've kind of been messing around with Overwatch 2, which has not been that well received by the community because it's basically Overwatch 1 with an improved game engine and improved graphics. But I never replayed Overwatch 1, so I've been absolutely loving it. I gave it a go previously on the PS4, but I didn't give it much of a chance because I was just too into Destiny to be almost blink a vision. But this time I've been absolutely loving it. All the characters are so different, so that's been most of the game. Most of the time being spent on that game. I messed around with Halo, which has had a little bit of an update. Forge is finally out, although you can't actually play the maps as far as I can see that they've been showing in the trailer. And I'm starting to. I've just been busy with a lot of family stuff, but looking into Christmas, I'm thinking of now finally to start to play Last of Us 2 with obviously with the TV series coming out in January. And I'm probably going to have to start God of War, the first one, given that Ragnarok is out. So yeah, that's pretty much in me. Al?
Game wise, I've probably played less of Genshin. That's the first one, and less of Punishing Grey Raven. So, but I have moved to just more mobile games, kind of behind the scenes.
So not giving that up then.
No, I mean, they're free to kind of like just play and try, and if it's interesting, then why not? So there's one called Tower of Fantasy, which I've been playing a little bit, and then another one that I've been playing recently. Been more just trialing on my phone. Bit of a weird one, and I might probably just delete it at some point. But yeah, it seems to be alright. It's what is it called? Goddess of Victory Nike on a mobile phone. Some random stuff. That's me for gaming.
Anything with lots of microtransactions, you're
effectively,
microtransaction junkie.
Yeah. Just for a bit of that adrenaline hit for for your loot boxes. Yeah, so those ones, and there has been new content on Genshin and other things that have kept me going as well. And I think the most I've been playing is just Arknights on the mobile is what I've been playing the most.
For a moment, I thought you said Gotham Knights. No, but
no, not Arkham Knights. No, I've no, it's great. It works really well on the mobile phone, and I've got one of those Samsung S21 Ultras, and I've got a little stylus, so it plays really well with a stylus. So it's great on that. Tech wise, not a huge amount. You know, the change in my work is obviously I've been involved in some other tech and things like that, but otherwise, not a huge amount different at this point. Not really done much. You know, we've obviously been doing a bit of research for CPUs and GPUs for the next wave and stuff, but probably still won't jump onto that this current wave. You know, my current setup is still operating pretty well. If anything, I've got a new laptop that's up in my other place, which I haven't been able to touch, but hopefully I'll be able to play with a lot of that over Christmas.
Nice.
yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Guess on my end, I mean, I've sadly, played next to zero games. Yeah, but I mean, I suppose you can't really count a Dawn of War mod that I kind of decided to kind of dust off after a fair few many kind of years. But it's the ultimate apocalypse mod, so I've been kind of messing around in that a little bit. But I think what I'm going to end up doing is probably kind of dropping some money on kind of the new God of War. It's probably going to be the end of the saga, and depending on my plans over Christmas, just start catching up on for some of the games that I've kind of missed out on this year. So
Yeah.
I might just kind of get hold of Elden Ring and Horizon. You know, might even basically try a Gran Turismo 7 because
Yeah,
I haven't
that's
owned one
that's on my list
in a
as well.
while. And I was thinking the other day, what happened to that action RPG? Was it Ark?
The one with
Uh,
dinosaurs in there.
No,
That
no,
one.
that's
Lost Ark.
no, the one that it's an action Diablo like action RPG
Yes,
published
Lost
by
Ark.
Amazon.
Yeah, Lost Ark.
Yeah, that
Lost
was
Ark.
no.
Lost Ark. That's it.
Lost Ark is a different one. There was another one.
No, no, Lost Ark's the one
It
I
was.
want
It
to
was.
play. Yeah,
Yeah, Lost Ark is the Amazon one. That's a Korean game.
that's
that
right.
Amazon have-
There's another one though, right? Is it New World?
I know.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
That was the real
Sorry.
Amazon.
Yeah, but
You're
the
right.
one
release.
I
Yeah,
want to
you're
play
right.
is Lost Ark.
Yeah, Lost
don't
Ark.
really,
I've played a bit of.
don't
as
really
well.
give a crap
Yeah.
about New World. So you know that's what I've got planned as soon as my time kind of like frees up. You know, in terms of tech stuff, you know, obviously trundling along with my job, you know, and just learning as much in that space as possible. And I've got to admit, not a lot else really at the moment. You know, like you said, in kind of like keeping track of what's happening with you know, next generation of PC hardware and the like. But yeah, not too much more than that really, and just trying to like obviously try to kind of edit and basically splice together these podcasts we do. You know, that's about it.
Cool.
Nice.
So guys, I think with that all said and done, I think it's just time to say our goodbyes.
So it's goodbye from me, Al.
And goodbye for me, Jay.
And goodbye from me, Joel. And whatever you're doing, please like, subscribe, and comment, and have a stellar day.